help it out.
G'day, Thunder Lizards and Starborn. My guest just turned on the bright light that is from Dracothian Star. I am... it is AOS Coach, and we are talking Seraphon, but a very special, specific Seraphon episode. It's not just some fancy pants, updating on rules and things like that. I'm actually joined by the GW Open Best General. You won Best General, right?
Right.
Best overall.
Correct.
Stupid two categories, and I'm like, I always mix up the two, but Dean Bilz won the Best General, so he crushed it against many opponents, and you took Seraphon, and you took a very untraditional list. I think when I initially looked, and I'll get an introduction for you in a second, Dean, but when I saw your list, if it was traditional Seraphon, I would have just rolled my eyes, and I wouldn't have invited you to come to the podcast. No offense to Seraphon, but it's a cookie cutter type list, right? You look at,
Sure.
certain builds, it's tried, tested, it's been played, and you can see it on battle reports. But when I saw your list, I went, okay, this is different. There's some interesting list science in here. And given that, the GW Open is like the best of the best when it comes to the GW Open series, the tournament series they've had for the whole year, and you took a little bit off meta list, I thought this would be an interesting conversation to think about as we're at the end of the General's Handbook, very possibly going into not only a new General's Handbook, but possibly a new Seraphon Battle Tome. Not that that's been confirmed, but I think you and I can both agree that one of them is going to be Seraphon, right?
Well, it's at least a 33% chance.
There's three of them. That's right.
Yeah, you got Cities and you've got Caradron Overlords, which are both older than Seraphon. But it's entirely likely, given that they're spoiling the Hunters Huanchi and everything else and releasing that Warcry Warband.
Yeah, so I think unless they're doing, and I've been teasing people in Discord, I'm like, oh, they're going to bring on 2 more books of Lumineth before they update. KO, and they're like, no.
They get a book every 6 months. That's just the rule. That's the way it's going to be.
Well, there's still 2 new temples to come, but hey, this is not the Lumineth show. This is not the Tyrion and Tekla show. It's the Dean show. So first off, for anyone who isn't familiar, who are you? Where are you from? And how on earth did you get an invitation to the GW Open?
I'm Dean Bilz. I live in Rochester, New York, so I mostly play on the East Coast over as far as the Midwest. My brother lives in Indiana, so I constantly will travel out there. So Chicago, Indiana, Indianapolis, any of those places I'll constantly travel out to. DC for Nova is also one that's within range. I'll drive 8 hours in pretty much any direction for a weekend tournament whenever I can get away from the wife, kids, and all of that. I got to the invitational finals because I won Chicago, which happened in beginning of November, end of October, one of those two. It happened pretty recently, right before Kansas City, which also qualified for the invitational.
So GW had, just for anyone who isn't familiar with the tournament series, Games Workshop hosted a bunch of 2-day tournaments, 5-game events across America. So there was Kansas City, Chicago, was there Seattle?
Seattle and San Diego were the four that I remember. They also got invites from Adepticon, the Las Vegas Open, and Nova, which are not official GW events, but they did have invites going out from those events as well. I think there might have been one more to make it the full 8.
London. I think it was the London GT because you had Phil and you had Darren Watson came over from the UK. So I think it was is those events too.
Yeah, so that's where the 8 slots for each side came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you had won you won Best General, right? So in order to so you won Best General, somebody else from that event won Best Overall, and you two together went over to play in this finals event in New Mexico. Bring up the image just for anyone, just some context setting, right? So this is the Best Generals bracket. So the best the people who won those tournaments in that category, so they got an invitation to this New Mexico tournament, right? And you basically played it out through the series.
Yeah, and the bracketing or the ranking that they're using here, the 1 through 8, they just pulled that off of whatever.
ITC.
I think it was ITC rankings. Yeah, which obviously the more you play, the higher your ranking is going to be. And I only had 2 events in there, which just to give you an idea, if you don't play a lot of 2-day events, you're just not going to have a higher ranking.
Was actually quite interesting because when you look at the game A matchup with Gavin versus Darren Watson, Darren's an incredibly great player, but because England doesn't really use the ITC, he actually was the lowest ranked player from that band. So
exactly, which is kind of what I want to say is like it's not really representative of player skill or anything else. They had to pick some metric, and that's the one they picked. And I don't disagree with it. It's just you have to play all these people anyway if you want to win. So it doesn't really change anything, but just to give people an idea of why it was ranked the way it was.
And for anyone who maybe isn't familiar with the scene or they didn't actually follow the tournament, do you want to give people a little bit of an example of how it worked? Because you can see that there's this winners bracket and then there's also a losers bracket, which is a bit of a new thing to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, I think it's a new thing to wargaming, really, because if you're familiar with fighting games, that sort of thing, they always use the double elimination bracket. That's what they all use. So this, if you've seen a top 8 for winners or a fighting game, this will be very familiar to you. But basically, you have 2 losses to give, and when you lose, you go to the losers bracket. And if you go to the finals, and I had lost, I would have had to play Matthias again. Because I would have a second loss to give. Some places do that differently where you get an advantage rather than having to replay. So like we go into a final game and I'm up 5 points or something. Obviously I'm just spitballing. I'm not saying that's the way it could be or should be, but there are other ways to do the bracket reset is what it's called when the winner loses in the winners finals or grand finals.
It's definitely an interesting way of doing things. It's not going to be replacing your local Games Workshop or any tournament because it's not. I mean, obviously you could do it if you want fun, but it was a great way to kind of weed out the best of the best. And instead of just immediately eliminating you and you're sitting around doing nothing, you could still have a chance to play through and actually come to the event, which actually, funnily enough, was one of your last opponents.
Yeah, and every other bracket. So there was the 2 brackets for 40K, there's 2 brackets for Sigmar, and then there was a bracket for Kill Team. And every single one of those, they all got bracket reset. I was the only person who just clean ended the thing and got out on time.
Undefeated champion.
Yeah, that's right.
So why Seraphon? What are you a long-term Seraphon player? Did you pick it up purely for this tournament?
It's the only Sigmar army that I had at the time. I'm currently painting some Ossiarch. I know they're not good, but I still want to have. I think they're going to get one of the death books, so I'm excited for that for them to have a thing. And yeah, fingers crossed. I don't think there's anything else. It has to be them, right?
Well, Flesh Eater Courts, but
there's 2 death books, so I think they're both.
But
yep,
Soulblight Gravelords is technically a second edition book. Whew, I had a heart attack and froze. It's technically a second edition book. So
it's the end of second though. So I think
it was.
Right. Just like the Seraphon book was basically.
Yes.
So Seraphon was the first army that I ever got in wargaming period. I got it when I was like 10 or 12 years old or something. I got the Bretonnia versus Lizardman box for Warhammer Fantasy. And that was my introduction to wargaming. And then obviously I didn't ever play with, didn't really play it anything sort of competitively. And I've roamed around war games for a while, finally made it to Age of Sigmar, and I just bought into the Lizards, which I used to have and that I liked. And that's the army that I have.
What was in that box? You had a bunch of skinks, you had a bunch of Saurus warriors.
Yep, skink Saurus warriors, and you had the Slon on that really ugly plank when it was carried by the 4 Saurus nut warriors or whatever, and he's just like leaning back with his stick in the air.
Like the Palanquin. It was like if you remember the old Bretonian, is it Reliquy? It's like that's right. I remember because that was one of my first box sets I got to play against. And I remember my mate wanted to play Bretonnia. I got to play Seraphon, Lizardman back in the day. Yep. And they always used to come with these weird cardboard heroes because GW was tight. And instead of putting a dreadnought in the kit, they would give you a cardboard cutout of a dreadnought, or the high elf dragon rider was like a piece of cardboard. I'm like, what was the hero? Because I think it was a griffin cardboard.
It was the Green Knight was in that box. And I remember because he was such bullshit, he just couldn't die. So just like you're just fighting this whole game against this stupid little model that will not die.
Oh
And then it
It's
was
good.
a couple squads of knights. I think that was it. I don't think there might have been archers, knights, green knight.
Yeah, there was some peasant archers. There was some peasant
Yeah.
archers. That was one of my first experiences into Warhammer too. That was such a good box. The
Yeah.
absolute. But so you've been a long-term Space Lizard, Seraphon, Jungle, Aztec combo, whatever you want.
Yeah, only for a year though, really, because like I think my first competitive game at a tournament was in New Orleans for the Open last year, and my like 7th game of Warhammer Sigmar ever was against Caleb Walters in New Orleans last year. So like I'm not really like super long term. I've only been playing this game competitively for the last year and a half or so, something like that.
Yeah, cool. No, just like, going back to the 90s and now coming to today, it's funny how the world kind of goes full circle.
Right.
So, what made you take, other than it being your army, like it's the only army that you own? What was your thoughts going into the GW event? Right. So you've gone to, was it the same list? Like when you went from Chicago
It was a
to,
very similar list. The thing that happened between the lists is Lizardmen or Seraphon probably took one of the worst nerfs in that war battle scroll update.
I was going to ask you about that.
So if I really wanted to play anything else, if I wanted to play Fangs of Sotek or Thunder Lizard, both of those lists really went up about 100 points. You got 20 points on the Skink Priest, 15 points on the Astrolith Bearer, 20 points on the Slan, 20 points on the Engine of the Gods. I think it comes up to like 85, 90 points, something like that. In nerfs, obviously, if you're playing the flies list, which Emma did play, you took a 2 flies loss or whatever. So they might have taken a worse points loss. But as far as like an army, like core linchpin unit sort of thing, like Seraphon really got hit. My list only went up 20 points, but I was sitting at exactly 2,000 in Chicago. So I had to shuffle things around. I lost a Bastillodon, whatever. So that it did change what I was thinking of doing. So for this event leading up to it, they had us in 1 week, they had us submit our factions. So our Grand Alliance and our faction inside of that. And I said I was playing Seraphon, and then Tom was saying was on Daughters of Cain, Gavin was on Daughters of Cain. So we knew what people were playing, and given that I knew what my matchups were going to be, that really solidified the list I wanted to play. Because I could play Thunder Lizard, or I could play Fangs of Sotek, or Dracothian's Tail, whatever. But knowing who I was going into, knowing that it was Tom for my first game, and knowing that most recently he had played the Foot Daughters of Cain, not the Marathi build, which is much more difficult for different matchups for a variety of reasons, But for me, like I feel very favored into that matchup with the list that I brought.
So just to pause for a second, just to
Yep.
bring people along, you didn't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't know the list that the person was going to play. So when
No, not yet.
So all you knew was that. So here's the draw, right? Did you know that your first opponent was going to be Tom Guan?
Yes, I knew it was Tom, and I knew he was going to be playing Daughters of Cain. I did not know the list.
So at this point in time, you say to Games Workshop, I'm playing Seraphon. You know that you're up against. Did you know that you're up against Tom before you told them Seraphon?
Yes. Yep.
Cool. So they showed you the draw. They
Yep.
filled in Seraphon or Daughters of Cain, and then you also knew that the winner would go up against either Caleb or Matthias. Then you would play either Gavin or Darren. So you kind of knew your pathway to success, but you didn't actually know the details and the intricacy, like the battle plans. You didn't know the actual lists of what was going to happen. It was just that was your pathway, yeah.
Yeah, I think they had released the battle plans as well at that time. So we knew the 7 battle plans that would be possible through there. And I knew winning or losing, I'd have to play one of Emma or Matt Sweeney.
Cool. So you knew your path, but it's not like you could develop a list that was tailored against these particular people, because
Correct.
you could have a rough idea. You could do your research and see if anyone's spoken on a podcast. You could see their tournament leaning lists, and you could see things like that. But you never knew
Exactly
that
right.
you couldn't game it.
Right. Exactly right. So I knew like what armies I'd be playing in my first 2 games. I knew the first one was Doc, and then I knew the second one was going to be either a flies list or Stormcast. Wasn't too familiar with Matt Sweeney going in. So that he was really kind of the wild card. I assumed some combination of art, like long strikes and fulminators and the standard fare. And what he brought was actually wildly different than what I had considered. So, like, I think his was like the most strange list that I didn't really think of, except for the Blades of Corn UK player.
Darren.
Had no idea. His list is like the wildest thing to me, and it was just like, and I asked my brother because he actually plays Blades of Corn, and he's like, "Yeah, seems like he's just trying to game the summoning points somehow. Let his guys die, get a million summoning points, cast a horror gas, try to resist it on a 6+ and whatever, and just go crazy on summoning," which I guess was his plan. So that one was a wild list.
There's a couple of off-meta discussion, and I think that's the key, right? Is that when you go to a tournament, and this is kind of why I want to unpack this with you, Dean, is you can't game the system. You can assume what you're going to see. You're going to, is there going to be a Cron Spine? Isn't there going to be a Cron Spine? How would I handle a Cron Spine? Those top 3 to top 5 armies, there's a good chance you're going to face them, and what would I do? But how did you think about your list? Like when you were thinking about this best of the best knockout series, your pathway to success, what were some of those list considerations? Anything that you wanted to draw from Seraphon? Any tools in particular you wanted to have up your sleeve? What was going through your head?
I think the first thing is that before I picked my army, like I have availability of using other armies. I can like borrow armies from a lot of different vectors. So it's not like I was stuck into Seraphon, but it is what I'm most comfortable playing, of course. And so the question is like, what did I feel was going to be the best path to victory? What was going to be best against an pretty open field? I really like Seraphon into that. There's a big Kronspine meta coming into this. I did just go up 80 points, but I still felt that some people were going to bring it, and they did. And the Kronspine is pretty terrible against coalesced Seraphon. 1 damage attacks and 2 damage attacks at medium rend. Like, we'll take that all day. It doesn't matter what it's doing, because the coalesce lets you reduce damage by 1, and it doesn't do anything. You want to fight, the thing wants to fight, you screen it out, it's going to fight a squad of Saurus Knights until the end of time, and that kind of sucks for it. Also, it's I think the Slann and Croak are probably the best defensive casters in the game. You dispel board wide, they can't hide from you. They're not going to be able to put their caster in the corner and teleport somebody down your throat guaranteed. They've got to deal with your +1, +2 dispel. So I think that Seraphon is just really good at everything. And people say it constantly, they're really good at everything. And that comes down to a lot of just +1s to dispelling board wide is a lot of power that the army has. So you're good against Kronspine, you're good against casters. So the endless spell meta with either Ravanax, Gnashing Jaws, or Purple Sun, or Horror Gas, or whatever people are trying to do, like send the boat down your throat. Obviously that happened in my Skaven games. Nobody gets to just do things against you unless it's invocations. Obviously they can have those all day, and they're usually pretty medium, so it's not like that big of a deal, but you have no way to get those off the board if they do get them out. So that kind of sucks. But against the general meta, I really like Seraphon because, like I said, you don't have a weakness hiding anywhere. You just you're very solid on all parts of the game. So that's why I ended up going with them. And then the reason I went with the Coalesced is, again, the same. I'm going to go with Coalesced so I can be good against the Kronspine, because I still, for the life of me, I can't figure out how these skink lists are winning. It blows my mind. It really does. You're stacking a million buffs so you can fire 61 shots with your blowpipes at something and then hoping the poison gets somebody. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, obviously you're teleporting salamanders, you're playing with salamanders, and they're really, really strong. Don't get me wrong, but it seems like you're really hoping to spike 6s everywhere. You're not very resilient. You're playing skinks, which are Galatian vets, so they're going to die to every bounty hunter that's ever existed. So I really ended up being in Coalesce, and then the question is Thunder Lizard or Kotal's Claw. And you just look at the difference between the factions. I really like the Saurus. I like playing the Saurus Knights. I think they're one of the best units to be bounty hunters. They're not Galatian vets. Obviously, they have a mount. And so that's why I went with them. You have a million attacks. When you charge, you get all-out attack, which is the faction bonus, which is why you want to be in Kotal's Claw. And you get a decent artifact, the Eviscerating Blade, which is 6s or 2 mortals in addition when you're hitting. So you take the hero that has the most possible attacks of 6 for the Scarvet on Carnosaur. then you give him that thing. Now, if you go to Thunder Lizard, you just get to double tap with one of your shooting guys, a Bastillodon or Engine of the Gods, and your monsters have +2 wounds. But if you look at a lot of the Thunder Lizard lists that have been winning, you're just playing 2 monsters. You've got the Engine of the Gods and a Bastillodon usually. So you're only getting +4 wounds. If you want to call it 8 wounds because of the -1 to damage, that's true. But that's what you're getting, is you're getting an extra 4 wounds versus all out attack whenever you charge. And you're pretty much always going to be the one charging. You've got 3d6 charges. You can screen where you need to and get the charges where you want them to be. So, and so that's really why I leaned towards Kotal's Claw. I just find that the bonuses are better. Also, the artifact in Thunder Lizard isn't even worth talking about. On a 2+, you get a mortal wound, and on a 6, you get D3 or something. Like,
yeah, it's a questionable artifact. Like I'd built a Thunder Lizard list. It's funny actually because I bought the Broken Realms boxes. I bought 2 of them where you got like 2 Steggies, 2 Bastillodons, and I'm like, this will be my casual, fun 2E Seraphon. Oh, it was like 3. Like it was gonna be a fun army, and then it just got an absolute boost in power. It's like you can sit in a box for a while. But it was right. Like I looked at the artifact and I was a bit but it's interesting because you don't see, or maybe I don't see a lot of Kotal's Claw. Like it always seems like Thunder Lizard, Thunder Lizard, Thunder Lizard, or you're on the other side of the book and you're going, Starborn.
Well, the big thing is people love the Bastillodon. I don't really get it. I just don't really understand because it's always mediocre for me. And you have to put a lot of points into making good. You need to take a Skink Priest because that's what gives you the all-out attack until your next hero phase. So like when you're double tapping it with the command ability, you can actually do that. So because otherwise you can't all-out attack the thing. It's hitting on 4s. So you want to be able to all-out attack it. So instead, you use this command ability from the Skink Priest in the hero phase, which gives you all-out attack until your next hero phase. I think it's Command of the Gods or something like that.
Sorry, continue.
So really, you need to stack a lot of things onto this Bastillodon to make it even real. It's 9 shots, -1 rend, 2 damage. On average, you're wounding 4 times, and it never does really anything. It's not really the targets you want to hit. You're not you can't guarantee anything with -1 rend, so I don't really like it too much. So that's why I've kind of shied away. I actually took it out of my list because it added more chameleon skinks, because you just can't force damage through with -1 rend. That's another reason I went away from that and just played a lot more chameleon skinks.
Is there and we will show the list, by the way, and I'll show the opponents and the path, and we'll try to understand the decision making of Dean on why you built what you built. And I'm sure many of you are thinking about, when we move from the next General's Handbook, how would the GV, the lack of GV and the lack of bounty hunters change this list? But is there a play style difference? Like, just talk to me a little bit, right? Like, imagine I've always played Thunder Lizards. Like, I love my Steggies. I love my Bastillodons. What I'm hearing so far is if I take the same list and I put it into Kotal's Claw, it's not nearly as good. And what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of unit selections that would be different in a Kotal's Claw list versus a Thunder Lizard list, despite them both being coalesced.
Yeah, I think I've said it before on previous podcasts and talks and everything. But I don't want to be mean to Thunder Lizard players, but I think it's more of the easy autopilot kind of build. As long as you use your command abilities in your hero phase and you shoot your Bastillodon twice, you're just going to get the value that you paid for. Your list is going to do what it's going to do. You're going to screen with skinks. They're going to die. And then you're still going to be shooting your Bastillodon twice, or your Engine of the Gods is going to be summoning units or doing whatever it's going to do. But there's not a lot of generalship in that. You're just doing what your list does every game, and you don't have a lot of pieces to do that. All of the pieces that we're talking about are 250 points or more. So you're playing with 8 units, 9 units, whatever, and they're all doing what they're supposed to do. So it's not bad by any means. I think it's a very good list especially for new players. So there's not a lot to remember. There's not a lot that you have to do or memorize or know about your opponent. You can actually focus more on what your opponent's doing and what their list is doing, because your list is going to do what it's going to do. When you play something like Kotal's Claw, a lot more of your decisions matter, where your positioning matters. And once, if you make a mistake and you get caught in a place you're not supposed to get caught in, or somebody catches you with some rule and ties up your hammer with one of their anvils and you can't get it out or do anything, you're just kind of stuck. And so mistakes are a lot more punishing in Kotal's Claw, because you really need to get your charges off. You really need to make sure your hammers hit not their anvils. You hit the targets that you want to hit, because a lot of times you don't have rend in a lot of places. If your fully buffed unit isn't hitting the thing it's supposed to hit, it's much more difficult to get value out of. So I think it's a lot harder to play, which could be why it's perceived as being a lot worse, when the benefits are actually pretty good. All out attack for all of your guys is, people pay for that, all out attack every time you attack something. So I like it.
It seems like a middle ground between Thunder Lizards and Starborn, because like my limited experience playing with Thunder Lizards feels like Sons of Behemoth in order. Like I'm just running a couple of monster trucks. I'm having an absolute field day. It's like running Beastclaw Raiders. It's like playing Suns. It's limited decisions. Your power is in individual models. You're not relying too heavily on the synergy. You then go to the other side, which is, your the Space Lizards, where it is all about the Bravery 10, high magic, very synergy driven between, the Athlish Bearer, the Slan, and the Saurus Guard, and all the combination that has to happen, right? And that was where the points, like a lot of people who play that kind of list, their points went up like 100, 120 points, where you said your list only went up 20. So
that's it, just the Slan.
So it feels like, you got the best of, and you can play a Carnosaur, and you can play it like it wants to play, as opposed to looking at like, oh, should I get a Troglodon to boost the magic output of my Slan?
I mean, I love the Troglodon. It's the first model I painted when I got the army, and it was like, I love that guy. I played him over the Slan in New Orleans. I'll never do it again. I can't recommend it, but the Troglodon is such a delight, especially with Croak, when you're just able to like cast his Celestial Deliverance, or whatever it's called, the 16-inch or 10-inch nonsense to just blow stuff up. It's so funny. Like, I love that little guy.
I got to ask you though, do you actually own the full model, or have you done what everyone else has done? I remember whatever, I can't remember the old name of the Lizardman forum, but it's got the guide on how to turn the Carnosaur kit into the Troglodon kit as well, and everyone's got the Troglodon coming out of the water using the spare parts for the Troglodon.
No, I have it built. I bought 4 of the start collecting Saurus boxes or whatever, so I have 3 Carnosaurs and 1 Troglodon.
Oh, it's such a I love it. I do love the model. It's goofy as all hell.
Yes.
It's so goofy. It's just fun, but I do enjoy it. But something that I did want to, before we get into lists, I did want to ask you about something hot off the press, and that is the Warcry warband. So,
these guys are the Hunters of Huanxi.
Yeah, the Hunters of Huanxi. There's 3 war scrolls. Yep. You have 2 chameleon skinks, essentially. One's a bit more melee focused, one's a bit more missile weapon focused. And then you have this Ripidactyl type model called the... Well, we'll get to it in a second.
Yeah, I thought there were just going to be new pterodons, but yeah, they were like...
That's what I thought.
Terror something, or...
Terror Wings?
Yeah,
we'll get to the name in a minute. I've got all 3 war scrolls, but what was your initial thoughts? I mean, obviously the models are incredible, and as soon as I saw that, I'm like, yes, I've got now some alternative things for chameleon skinks.
I think they're basically the same as chameleon skinks for the most part. These guys have a leader, which is important. They have a champion. Normal chameleon skinks don't, so you can't issue orders, you can't rally, you can't stop them from running. So these guys having a champion is huge. They have the same poison on hitting for the dart pipes with 1 extra attack, because they do have a champion. The musician doesn't matter. No one cares if you're going to be able to run in charge with these things. You're never going to do that. The big difference is on how they are defensive. So the chameleon skinks now have a 4+ ward while they're within 1 inch of terrain, not in cover, not in terrain, just within 1 inch. You just drop them anywhere and they get the 4+ ward, which is really, really strong, and probably the best of the ward updates or cover save updates that they gave out back at the beginning of 3rd. This one, however, is kind of interesting, where you can't be seen more than 12 inches away, or not at all if you're in cover. And now this is funny, because if you drop them in, let's say like you have the other Hunters of Wanchi, the melee guys, let's say you drop them in and you charge into cover against like long strikes or something, they can't shoot you. You charged into cover, they can't overwatch you or whatever it's called, and
Only shell. Yeah.
and they can't shoot you in the next turn when it's their turn either, because they cannot see you. So they've got to beat you in combat with your stupid little chameleons with clubs and bolas or whatever, and they can't fight you. So
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that because you think about the initial part. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. They're not visible if they're on terrain or if they're, outside of 12, which is handy, right?
sure.
Means you can't be targeted by spells. You can't be targeted by shooting. But there is some absolutely interesting play. I love that you call that out, is if you're in cover and you obviously either deploy in cover or you drop outside of cover and then hit the charge or move, whatever it might be. It makes them great for contesting objectives. It allows you to do a few flexible things that maybe you wouldn't normally do with the average chameleon skink.
Right. They do cost 20 more points than chameleon skinks, but I think overall, especially if this is the way they're going with perfect mimicry, I think it's a fine change. Honestly, it's got a lot more funny play. I do wonder if it's going to get changed, like they can't be seen at all, like in combat or something. Maybe they'll change that specifically, but right now it's very funny.
Would you swap them if I was the average chameleon skink user? Well, actually, no. Before we do that, if I wasn't using chameleon skinks, do you think this war scroll is good enough to be considered in the average Seraphon list?
I mean, the average Seraphon list doesn't play chameleon skinks. I think I'm the only person playing chameleon skinks at all. So no, I don't think that's going to change anybody's minds about them, especially going up 20 more points. On average, they do 3 mortal wounds in shooting, or no, 2.5 or something. Whatever it is. So they're not very, like, you're not doing a ton of mortal wounds, whatever it is. Yeah, 1.5 mortals, because it's 10 of them. I was doing the math for the 2 squads, because I played 2 squads of the chameleon skinks. So yeah, I don't think anybody's going to start picking these guys up. If they're not going to play chameleon skinks, they're not going to pay 20 more points for these guys when the defensive trickery is not much better. In fact, it's arguable if a 4+ ward is generically better than this perfect mimicry new rule.
So then my next question would be, if I was playing chameleon skinks, would you swap them out to be this unit instead?
It depends how much shooting's in the meta, really, and really it's just long strikes right now and iron blasters, I guess, if we're talking about iron blasters. But I mean, I don't think I'd make the change. I don't know where I'd find 20 more points per unit. That's kind of a big deal. It is nice having a champion though, because when like one of them dies in their bravery 5, you're like, oh my god, here we go. This is how we lose the squad.
Yeah, it always surprises me that you don't see as many chameleon skinks in, and I think it's just you run out of points, especially as we saw the battle scroll increase the points across Seraphon. Right. I think people have intentions to run things like Ripidactyls or chameleon skinks, but when you look at the core of the army and it's very, very strong, you just run out of points.
Yeah, and you're priced into playing a certain way, especially if you're playing Starborn. You have to take an Astrolith Bear, you have to take a Slan, you have to take so many points of whatever just to maximize your summoning, which is very good. Don't get me wrong, but it's random summoning. I don't know why it's all D3s, but that's just another complaint for another day. But yeah, I would definitely, if I was going to play the Starborn, I'd be playing the Fangs of Sotek. I'd be bringing a squad of 10 chameleon skinks so that they can shoot things and run away or whatever.
But it's good for scoring. It's good for scoring battle tactics. I mean, obviously, we don't know what the new battle tactics going to be, but in the current General's Handbook, there's a couple of good ones. Being able to claim a piece of terrain, having 2 units in enemy territory, like there's things that'll help you score your grand strategies as well. So,
which is exactly why I'm playing them.
Yeah.
I'm not the teleport army. I can't get across into their side as easily, especially if you're playing Dracothian's Tale. A lot of the battle tactics become trivial. But I play 2 units of chameleon skinks and the Celestin Prime so that I can be on their side of the board. And that's really why is the current battle pack, because you get 2 battle tactics very easily without even having to try.
Yeah, it's like when I run my daughters of Kane, you always have those 2 units of Canary. Otherwise, you'll score like 2, 3 battle tactics with Canary alone. And I see if you don't have the teleporty shenanigans and you're struggling a little bit on your battle tactics, this could be a way to kind of boost them up a little. But
Right.
this is the other one. There's another version of it, and it's actually more of a melee type focus, I think. So it's less about the blowpipes. It's more about there's a few more, I guess. At least you got the Starstone bolus, which is as opposed to the blowpipe.
Yeah, you still get a decent number of attacks with the bolas, half the number of attacks. They're still they do this weird stun thing, which is interesting, but it can be funny. The big thing is that they did the same thing they did with the 1 unit of Stormcast guys that deep strikes outside of 9, but can't shoot 9 inches. Like, question mark. Like, so it'd be cool if you could drop these guys. They have a 10-inch range, and then you can throw your bolas, give them the -1 to hit, and then charge into them. Which is, that actually be worth something. I don't forget how many points these guys were.
They were at 90, I think, from memory. 90,
Yeah.
99. There was somewhere between like 80 to 100. I think it's about 90, I think, from memory.
Yeah, I think the flying guys were like 60 points, which I thought was awesome because that makes them like the cheapest thing in the codex. So you're paying just a point per wound or 10 points per wound, which is like where I average. Is this worth taking just on the wounds count alone? So they're kind of cool. But yeah, if these guys are 90 points, it's just if they had a 10-inch range, I'd like them so much more.
It does hurt a little bit. And, like if you go in there with your bolus, you're not going to do a lot of damage, let's be honest. But again, they're a utility, harass, battle tactic, steal objectives off people. Actually, I do want to call out, I do love the ability to, unlike Canary, once you drop them down on the table, you can take them off, put them back into reserve. And they have rules very similar to like again, go back to Daughters of Cain. You've got the teleporty, what's it called? The Shadow Strike, where they're on an objective and then, you put them back into reserve. Then the next turn you can put them back into deep strike. So if you need to go from one side of the board to another to steal an objective that you don't have the movement to go claim, I love the versatility, and the melee ones are not too bad, the price.
Yeah, they're pretty well costed. They're 10 in a squad, or are they 5?
5s from memory.
Yeah. 10 would be great.
5s.
Yeah, if they were 10, that'd be really good. Then I'd actually really like these guys. The big thing with the going back in the sky, like the current Chameleon Skinks do that. They can go back in. The big thing is that you can't do it on turn 3, so you can't bring it because you'll die. Because if you're not deployed on turn 4, deep striking units die per the GHB, whatever. So if you're not, but if on turn 4, you can pull them into the sky and then bring them back down on turn 5. So because the trigger for dying in deep strike is specifically beginning of turn 4. So it's something, and it did come up one time. Like I dropped them down to like, crap, how am I going to get over here to get this objective? All right, Chameleon Skinks, it's time to go.
So it's almost like, okay, turn 1 you deep strike them down. No.
Turn 1, turn 2, whatever.
No, yeah. As long and then you go back in. Yeah.
As long as you bring yourself back in and you're not in deep strike on the beginning of turn 4, you're safe.
Yes, yeah, but you can teleport to turn 5 if you set it up correctly.
Yes.
This is a new unit. As you said, I thought this was going to be just another update to like the pterodons or the ripidactyls, but this is something completely different.
Yeah. The funniest thing I find about the ripidactyls, pterodons, and terrawings is that the ripidactyls and the terrawings move 12. The pterodons move 16, and they're carrying giant rocks. I don't get it. They're not the melee ones. they're carrying giant rocks, and they're so much faster.
They're just buff. Yeah. So when you look at the terrawings, do you like them? Because ripidactyls and pterodons, you don't see a lot of them on the table in general. So I don't know if that's a war scroll issue or points issue, or if it's just that everyone has the best intentions to include them, but they just get dropped out because of these synergy bubbles that we've spoken about before.
As I mentioned just a second ago, I like these guys specifically because they cost 60 points, and they are 6 wounds for 60 points. And once you're paying 10 points per wound, you're already doing pretty well. They're fast. They can grab objectives. They're not going to hold them super well with just the 3 of them. But I did play Ripperdactyls once upon a time, and you'll be surprised the number of games you can just win by having something that's fast. You know, you got 3 guys that's more than a hero that they're leaving back to cap an objective, whatever. These guys they don't fight well, and the worst part is that they have a snapping beak. If it was a snapping jaw, they'd get +1 attack and blessed.
Just a quick clarification. Terror Wings are 75 points, so they're 3
they're
to
75.
Yeah, so the Dart Pipe Chameleon Skinks are 5 for 135 points.
Yep.
The melee focused ones are 90 points for 5, and then the Terror Wings are 3 for 75.
So they're a little more than I'd like to pay.
None of them are battle line options. There's no battle line ifs. They're just other.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, I don't think they were going to release a real Codex Battle Tome update mid-season or whatever. But when they get the book, we might finally get, if you take a Pterodon, because you have the hero versions of the Pterodon, the hero version of the Ripperdactyl guy, and they don't do anything right now. But given the books we've seen in the past, like if they make Ripperdactyl's battle line or Pterodon's battle line and actually do something, you might see them actually show up. And maybe that'll go over to Terror Wings as well.
Terror Wings have 2 interesting rules. I'd love your thoughts on them. First being the nerve shredding screeches. So in the shooting phase, you can pick one enemy unit that's within 12 inches of it and roll 2d6. If the roll is higher than the unit's bravery, that enemy unit cannot issue or receive commands until the end of the turn. So no all-out attack, all-out defense, no redeploy, no inspiring presence.
Yeah, turning those off is very good. Roar is a 3+, and this is so much worse than that. I think it was Vince from his podcast that said GW just doesn't understand statistics, because 2d6 doesn't beat the bravery of pretty much anything. Because it has to be higher, it can't tie it. So it's got it. The only thing that your odds even to beat is bravery 6 and less. And that's rats, skinks, the skinks that aren't in Starborn, I guess.
Cities, Gits, Garg. I mean, Gargants are a bravery 7 on average, so a mega Gargant. So I think the challenge is there's so much chaos, there's so much death, and there's a lot of high bravery type order and other armies that you might at a GT you might get two good opponents where you could use this, but it's a high risk play.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't cost you anything to do it. That's the good news, except for taking these guys in your army, which, I mean, that is a cost for sure. It's just, I don't like the bravery. I don't like the bravery rolls. They should all be 3d6, or depending on what they're targeting, maybe it scales up. I don't know. But they keep releasing these 2d6 bravery check rules, and they're always bad. It doesn't make any really sense to me, because the things you want to target with them are things you can't target with this, or just hope to get very lucky, I guess.
Yeah, it's the same reason when I was looking at the Slaves to Darkness book, when the Mind Stealer Kitty Cat had changed its rules to a bravery check like this, I'm like, nah, I'm out. At least when it used to be like on a 4+, I was happy for a 50-50 shot. Now it's like there's too much high bravery. Look, it wouldn't write the War Scroll off completely, but I wouldn't take it purely for this particular rule.
Correct. Yeah, this is not worth points to me. It's nice to have, but I wouldn't bring it for this thing. That's exactly what you're saying. And
what about the other side, the symbiotic relationship?
I would really like this if it didn't have the 9-inch away from enemy units thing. You're already having to put chameleon skinks wherever, and then you could drop these guys in front and maybe get a 6-inch charge or something if it didn't have that. Or if they're already in combat, you can drop them in near combat and nearly guarantee a charge. But otherwise, like, I don't really understand why they don't just have standard deep strike rules. Just deep strike on their own. I don't know why they need Hunters of Huanchi to be around. I don't know why there's no synergy between them. It's not like Hunters of Huanchi are +1 to hit while they're around this thing or anything like that. There's no reason other than they come in the same Warcry box, I guess. So not really impressed by that. I would really like if it just didn't say the 9 inches. setting these guys up within 3 inches that you deep strike in the Hunters of Wanchi in front, and then these guys right in front of them, and you got a 6-inch charge. That's awesome. Big fan of that. But since they can't, I don't know. Not a fan.
And there's no elite unit there, so they can't issue their own command. So if they fail that charge, and you want to probably get, I mean, unless you're deep striking them in for the shooting attack. And again, we just talked about the value of the shooting attack. I mean, the combat profile isn't that great anyway.
No.
4 attacks, hitting on 4s, winning. So, like, are you deep striking them because you want to get them into combat? Probably not.
Right.
So, like, these remind me a little bit of like Aether Wings, where you take them in to harass your unit, to screen, to be annoying, to
get +1 to shoot. Like Aether Wings have a great buff, you know.
But you're taking them for like cheap chaff, fast chaff, chaff that can take early objectives while the rest of your force goes out and does its thing. And if these die, they die. But yeah,
they're already plenty fast. It's not like they need to deep strike to get a charge off. So I don't really know what the benefit is of putting them in there with the tax of taking another Hunters of Huanchi unit in order to do this.
Which is what I wanted to hear from you. It was basically, do you like the rule? And then would it actually get you to swap out your Chameleon Skinks or to bring in one of the Hunters units? And I think the answer is probably no. The synergy there itself to 200 points is probably not worth it. But it's a bloody cool model. And who knows what's coming in a new battle time? There could be
They always change the rules for these mid-season releases. We just saw it with the Lumineth book. You know, they changed them coming in. So we'll see what they end up being.
And you know what? There might be some rules where, you know, there's an artifact or a command trait that allows you to deep strike within 6. You know, you see it in the what's it called? Like you see in Stormcast where you can deep strike outside of 7 as opposed to. Yeah. So who knows? This is all just like, it's a great model. You never know what's coming down the line.
Like I said, you take off that 9-inch rule, and they still drop within 3 of their friends. I'm in for those guys. They suck. They don't do a lot of fighting, but if you can like get a charge off, even just drop the Chameleons in and they get a charge off with these guys to screen out something or just take an Overwatch from something, great. I'm in for like versatility and usefulness, but as it is, too many things that already.
The points in Seraphon are already too tight. So I think being very clear on why you're taking the unit and what role it's playing and what's the value it's bringing. Again, there's tough decisions being made. I know even my Thunderlids list, it was becoming very difficult because all these different little things I wanted was hitting the 2K mark super easy. And I was like, oh, I don't have chaff. I don't have this. I don't have that. It's like, where's my tough trade-offs, let alone, you know, but yes, to David's point, this is kind of what I'm kind of referring to, is you can absolutely use them to deep strike to achieve battle tactics. If you are struggling to get capture terrain, having multiple units on, you know, a proving ground, if you have a battle, obviously these aren't battle line options, but if you're struggling to capture the proving ground, you're struggling to capture this or to do this, these might be tools that could help you.
Yeah, I guess my counter to that is just if you take 2 units of Chameleon Skinks, as they are right now, they might change points later. That's 230 points. The Hunters of Huanchi at 135 Chameleon Skinks with those guys at 75, that's 210. Like you're only paying 20 points more to have 2 units that actually do what you want them to do already. Or you take the 95 point with the 75 point guy, you save a few points, but you don't have the shooting output. I know where I am on that side of the conversation. Just take the things that do the things. You don't need to save points with Pterodons, Terror Wings, or whatever.
You do you. I think I agree with you. But if my list is, you know, I don't know what 19, no, not even 1910. Like if I'm almost at the end of my list and I want those 2 deep striking units, it might be an option. But I think if I'm at the early starts of list building, yeah, I'm probably going more to Chameleon Skinks or some other option,
right?
As opposed to that being a priority choice.
Yep.
Speaking of priority choices, let's talk your list. Let's actually talk your tournament winning list. And I'd love to hear about how you thought about the battle pack, you thought about the list design, thought about the synergies, and you will see a couple of options. And before anyone freaks out and like they blow up the internet like Kim Kardashian, there was a error. The Warblade is a war spear. There is no difference. There is no reason to take the Warblade. It is a copy pasta error, nothing more. Dean does not have any secret list tech on why you take the Warblade.
Yeah, I don't know anything you don't know. The Warblade has the exact same profile as the War Spear. It has no bonuses. It's got no War Scroll rules. Whereas the War Spear, you get +1 damage on the charge. There's no reason ever to take the Warblade. I don't know why it's on the War Scroll at all. It doesn't make any sense. Like I could have just made it like 2s and 2s or something, and then at least there'd be a reason for it to be on the War Scroll. But otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So if there's any confusion, it's not real. It was a War Spear. Of course, it was a War Spear.
People, when I put your list up into the Facebook group, I was talking to Seraphon people, and that was the first comment. People were like, "Why is he doing this?" So let's talk through the list. And I'd love to hear a little bit some of your thinking again, because this is a bit of an untraditional list, but it's also very this General's Handbook. Saurus Knights have definitely seen popularity grow, and I'd be curious to think about as well when the next book comes, or the next General's Handbook comes. Will some of these units drop off, or is there any considerations on what would swap in and swap out? But I'll read through the list. You've got your Slan Star Master with the grubs, the grubs, the artifact, Itsy grubs, and the Stellar Tempest spell. You've got the Saurus Scar Vet on Carnosaur. That's the general. That's got the dominant predator and is a war spear. We have the Eviscerating Blade and the Beastmaster, one of the new mount traits that were added to from White Dwarf.
Yep.
You have 2 Skink Star Priests, both with a Hand of Glory. You have primed.
One of those is a Star Seer with Hand of Glory.
Sorry, that is me. One's a Skink Star Seer, one is a Skink Star Priest. That is me having a bias of just reading the same thing, but they both have Hand of Glory. They both have Hand of Glory. You've got Prime Time, which is an ally. You've got 5 Saurus Guard, 2 units of 5 Chameleon Skinks, 2 units of 10 Saurus Knights with Lancers, and a unit of 5 Saurus Knights with Lancers. So
yes,
all wrapped up in a Bounty Hunter, a Battle Regiment, and a commanding entourage with Magnificent, getting yourself an extra artifact and 207 wounds at 7 drops.
Yes.
A lot of things here, man. The Prime you don't see very often. I've heard some people talking a bit about Prime, but it's not the most popular ally choice. You definitely, as we talked already, the Chameleon Skinks, we don't see them a lot. And this particular General's Handbook has really increased the value of Saurus Knights, where traditionally the world would be either Saurus Warriors or would be Skinks.
Right. Whereas this is a battle line choice that is not a Galatian vet. It's not going to take bonus damage from bounty hunters, while also being able to be bounty hunters themselves. They were already very good at clearing chaff, and now it's like 5 of these guys will kill like 30, 40 clan rats by themselves without even, no question. Yeah, like they're one of my favorite units, one of my least favorite models. The model is truly horrible.
Yeah,
I hated painting them, and I had to paint 5 more for this event because of the points change. I lost the Bastillodon. There was a Bastillodon in this at Chicago. It was one of the easiest drops. Again, it's so underwhelming just as a model choice. I think it used to do more. Maybe there was like back at the beginning of 3rd, end of 2nd, like there was a lot more targets for it, but it can't even reliably kill support heroes in one salvo. So I'm just not a big fan of it. And it certainly doesn't do anything against a lot of the armies that we're seeing right now with higher armor saves and everything. 4+, 3+, whatever. Don't really care for that. The Chameleon Skinks are there for scoring the 2 battle tactics, either barge through enemy lines or desecrate their land. Similarly, the Celestant Prime is also there for that purpose. That's what I played it for in Chicago. I only had 1 Chameleon Skinks and him, so then they would commit down on the same turn and then be able to do that battle tactic for me. Because obviously you're a very melee-centric army. You're not able to push through their lines the traditional way, so you got to do it the backwards way, the back capping style. The Saurus Guard are only there just to protect the Slan. Though I have randomly won games, and I won my final game, my 4-0 game at Chicago, because they're Galatian vets. They stopped, what is it, against the odds that requires them not to be contested by a Galatian vet or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just happened to be standing there. So that was kind of wild. But they were I almost cut them because for another unit of 5 swords, so I'd play 10 by 10 by 10. The only reason I didn't do that is because I was a little bit worried with Stormcast being in my bracket that the long strikes would shoot the Slann off the table. Because the long strikes can reasonably 6 long strikes can reasonably do 7 wounds, whatever, in shooting through the 6-up ward, and especially if they're doing mortals. Now they got to do 17 wounds, which is a lot bigger of an ask for pretty much any unit. So it protects you from a turn 1 alpha strike on your Slann, which is probably the most important model in the army.
Yeah, like that pays for itself right there, right? If you like, when I look at lists like this, outside of that, the Saurus Guard, you want to take down the Slann as soon as possible. It's shutting off my magic. It is got the spells to be able to do mortal wounds to my support heroes to chip off certain things. It's just a commanding board-wide presence. So the sooner I can get that Star Master off, the better. And if when you start being able to bodyguard with the Saurus Guard, being able to use heal as well, the heroic recovery or Emerald Life Swarm, it just makes it either A, I'm committing a lot of my resources, and then that's where your Carnosaur and your Saurus Guard come at me, or your knights.
Right.
Or I ignore it, and you love that. I ignore it, because then you just do what you want to do.
Exactly. That's exactly it. 100%. Also, the Itsy Grubs heal you. They're Master of Magic, plus they heal you 1 during each of your hero phases, which comes up constantly. Like, people will just take a pot shot at the Slann. A lot of that wounds will go to the Saurus Guard. 1 will make onto him. He's like, all right, I'm good. I got that back. We're good.
So demoralizing.
It is the funniest thing.
So how does this work? Like, let's break this down, right? So first off, let's acknowledge the pink elephant in the room from Stormcast. You have the prime time, 300 points. Why is it in your list? Why haven't you put 300 points into something else that's Seraphon? What is it doing, and how are you using it?
The biggest weakness of this list, if you look at every other model that's not a Celestin Prime, in fact, if you look at every other model in the Codex that is not, I guess, a Salamander, you don't have any rend. There's no rend anywhere in the book. Nowhere. We get -2 rend on Salamanders. The Sauruses don't have rend on anything. Nothing. And on your Jaws attack with the Scarvet, you get -1 rend. That's it. Primetime, however, has -3 rend. Yeah. And you give
it's on 3s, woos on 2s, rend 3 for 3 damage, gets to auto choose 1 dice every turn.
Or just say he declares that he's charging. You just drop him in, you say, I declare that I'm moving 12. And then your opponent says, what? And you say, I didn't just say it, I declared it. It's very important.
So the rule, folks, if you haven't looked at this, is every turn the prime can determine 1 dice roll. So instead of making the dice roll, it's like hit, wound, save, or charge, I think it is, or run.
Yes.
You can just pick the number between 1 and 6. But if you do a charge roll, you can pick the number between 2 and 12. Correct. So prime comes from the sky, outside of 9, outside of 12. Who cares? Sorry. 11.99. Like, you need to be within 12. You could automatically go, yep, it's a 12-inch charge, no dice roll. And I've been playing Prime recently. I've been playing for the last 6 months. I love him because you can't use him in turn 1, because if he stays in the sky, he gets +2 attack. So he goes from base 3 to 5 to 7, 3s and 2s, rend 3 for 3. So if you keep him up for at least 2 turns, he gets 5 attacks.
Yeah, 1 round. Round you keep him up. Yep.
Yeah, so by turn 2, you're on 5 attacks. Turn 3, I usually drop him down in turn 2.
Turn 2 is statistically the best if you don't believe that turn 5 is real. Which I don't believe turn 5 is real. So doing the math there, it's the best. I did bring Prime in on 2 separate occasions on turn 1 during the event, and it happens a lot. The reason is the list is designed to snipe out support heroes. So the Slann casting Stellar Tempest, which is going to do mortal wounds where you want them. The Skinks are going to do some number of mortal wounds. And if you need a support hero to die, he just picks somewhere on the board, and everything within 3 inches of that point takes D3 mortals. It's not a shooting attack. It doesn't. You can use it outside of combat, away from the thing that you're currently fighting. And basically, it's a 6-inch aura. And you just say, okay, are these 2 units within 6? All right, well, I'm going to get everybody in this 6-inch bubble with these D3 mortals. There's no roll. They just take D3.
Yeah, it's just flat D3 for each of the units. And I know when I was building my, it's funny actually, because I was building a Stormcast list that included a Slan Starmaster, the Comet from Stormcast, and the Prime, because then I could just do like 9 mortal wounds in a bubble. It's like, oh, you got support heroes, see you later. But that changed a little bit, because now the Starmaster can't cast the Comet. It used to be a little loophole.
It was the funniest thing is it's the only war scroll at the time was the Stormcast war scrolls that said you couldn't
it didn't have
you couldn't be cast by a non-Stormcast wizard, where every other war scroll had said that thing. And in fact, it was in the FAQ. They FAQ'd it that you couldn't take the Everblaze Comet outside of Stormcast. They had a FAQ specifically for the Stormcast spells. I checked because I was going to cast the hell out of the freaking thing if I was allowed. But yeah, so that was kind of wild that they did make that change. I really love that that interaction. I think Honest Wargamer had a list in they called like Reign of Stars or something.
Yeah, he was also using the Star Drake because of the Reign of Stars. So there was a combination of just absolutely pure mortal wounds. But going back to your Prime, the reason you've got the Prime is because you've got the Rend. You've got utility of the mortal wounds. You've got a bit of a combat monster who can, not literally a monster, but like a combat threat that can come into enemy territory. And it's a very de-risk situation because he gets to determine automatically a 12-inch charge.
Yeah, it's the easiest, one of the easiest models to play in the whole game. I was talking to like Autopilot. This guy he's such a delight because you don't have to worry about anything. You just say, I'm going to put him in. I need to do 2 mortal wounds to this hero to make sure they're dead. And he comes. He does this thing. I'm going to go hit this, whatever it is, for 9 to 15 damage. I mean, the Rend is -3. Good luck. Whatever your after save is.
2 more things. He's got a 4-up ward save, so it's native. So he brings that with him, which is awesome. And he's a sub commander. So he's only got 8 wounds. So it means you can put him into a battalion very easily.
Yes. And he got in a fight with Bastion Carthalos, and he won. And it was wonderful. It was everything I've ever wanted in the whole wide world. Like he's -3 Rend, Bastion's only -2. Neither of them are monsters roaring each other. So, and I get to pick a save too. So it's like I passed that save. All right, well, you have 1 less attack. It's so funny. But yeah,
go on. Sorry,
I was gonna say like Bastion was like I'd never played against the model before. I didn't even know what he did because nobody plays this guy. He's like Celestant Prime that has to walk, but he also does he has that mortal wound rule where he picks a unit on the battlefield and he like, all right, you got 12 wounds. I'm going to roll 12 dice. Every 6 is a mortal wound, which is just, he's such a weird model. He does do 4 damage, -2, 4 damage, 3s and 2s.
I'd expect to see him more often now. You got the Mega Gargants coming back because then he gets to roll 40 dice. But
yeah, 35 or whatever they are. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, some megas have 40, so it's just like cool. 40 dice on a 6, it's a mortal wound. But what I'm hearing, and just to kind of bring us back, is the Prime has a very specialist role that the Battle Tome, your Seraphon Battle Tome, doesn't currently have an answer for. Like,
no,
you can get some combat-y type monsters like your Carnosaur, like your Steggies and things like that, but it doesn't have the tools.
I played that spot has been traditionally. I usually play 6 heroes in my Seraphon list. I only have 5 here because the Celestant Prime came in, replacing. I've played the Engine of the Gods. I've played the Troglodon. I played a second Carnosaur. I played everything you can imagine, and usually there's a Skink Priest in the list. But once you drop all the Skinks out of the list, the Skink Priest isn't as good because you can't get your +1 to hit. The 3+ to run and charge only works on Skinks. You don't have anything to take that with. So like you drop those, and then the Skink Priest is now 120 points or something, up from 70 it was in June. So they really don't like that guy. He's he's had a bad year.
He's a little undercosted.
I think I don't know how much undercosted he was, especially when he couldn't cast spells. Then they released 3rd edition, let him cast or prayers or whatever. They gave him like a prayer list that he could have, which was a huge boon. But yeah, the 3+ to run and charge is pretty good for Engine of the Gods or Stegodons, whatever. And the +1 to shoot until your next hero phase is very good. But that's it. Like, it's just a hero phase piece that does a couple of things, and casts some prayers or chants some prayers, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's the big reason. As I've played every other hitter in the Codex, I've played everything. I've also considered playing Alania and Elithor, and they serve a very similar role as well. Because on turn 2 they do 2 damage. It's not 3 like the Prime, but on turn 3 they do 3 damage. And on turn 5 they do 5 damage. They're also a +1 caster. So back when Laocoon was only 30 points, they were 265. Laocoon was 30. You could do for 295. They could go anywhere on the board. So they kind of had the same I can get in your deployment zone kind of feel. But once I had to walk them, and Laocoon was like 50 points, you're basically paying 265 plus 50 is 315. I'm just going to play this Lost in Prime all day at that point. But I did have in one of my test games, I did have Alania fight the Celestin Prime in turn 5, and boy did they win. Boy did they have a good time. They have a 5-up ward as a spell. Their War Scroll spell is a 5-up ward. So it's not like the Prime, but they are 3-up, 5-up, and he's a 3-up, 4-up. So they're very similar. And they do cost 60 less points. And if you're looking for a beater and a caster, like they are very good. And they actually went down 20 points with the Codex release from 285 to 265. So I do like them a lot. And if for some reason the Prime goes up in points or changes, whatever, I'd love to play that guy again. Also, at some point, I don't know when it happened, but I used to be able to take the Sylvaneth as an ally. Why is it flashing? That's wild. But
keep going.
Sylvaneth was an ally, and I think in the GHB for this year they took them away. So Sylvaneth's not an ally of Seraphon anymore, so I can't take the freaking doodly doot Piper trees.
Oh, your tree revs. Oh,
I would have absolutely played tree revs instead of Chameleon Skinks, because they're like 10 less, they're 5 less points each. You can put them into their Galatian vets. You can make them conquerors, expert conquerors, or whatever. Like, I mean, there's so many. They're easily the best Galatian vet in order right now, by a lot.
Yeah, tree revs are hot, having the same teleport rules. And unlike Chameleon Skink, where you put something in reserve and then you bring them out of reserve, they're just teleporting in the same turn, which for less points, same amount of wounds. Yeah, they don't have the
Oh no, they got double the wounds. They got 2 wounds a model.
2 wounds, of course. Okay, yeah, but they don't have the ward. They don't have the ward.
They don't have a ward, and they don't have a shooting attack, I don't think. But they do fight. They actually fight pretty reasonably. I think it's like 3s and 4s, -1 damage or something, 2 attacks. So they're actually reasonable at fighting. I think that's what their profile is. But yeah, and I would definitely be playing them at least 1 unit over the Chameleon Skin, because they're just so silly, so good. But obviously, once you play this Lost in Prime, you don't really have a lot of points for allies anyway. So
no, and I think you're out of points, so you'd have to drop the Prime, because I think they're 80, 85 points. So you couldn't even sneak one in. Before I move on to the Saurus Warriors, so the Saurus Knights, because I do want to talk about that.
Sure.
Burning question: if Render's a problem for Seraphon, why wouldn't you go get Purple Sun?
Didn't want to spend the points for it, and I don't like casting endless spells. It's nice to have the endless spell, because you always have an extra cast with the Slan. He casts Stellar Tempest, he casts Comet's Call, and then you have an extra cast. It's usually Mystic Shield most of the time. But every once in a while, if I've got points, I'll play the Burning Head, but at 90 points, it's really, really tough. That's another unit of guys almost. So I definitely would I have played it. I did test with it. I decided I'd rather play 10 more nights or 5 more nights, get 10 extra wounds in the list. That's about it. Also, the Skink Starseer, his War Scroll spell is -1 to their save. So it's also like once they get in 18 inches, you already have that built in. You have like a kind of mini Purple Sun going on. And the Star Priest War Scroll spell, if you don't know, is -1 to hit for a target unit. So one of them casts Hand of Glory, one of them casts their War Scroll spell, depending on which one you're looking for at that exact moment. And then the Slan does whatever Slan things he's going to do over in the corner.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that there was, because I'm sure there were some people going, well, if I don't really want to buy the Prime, and some people don't like going outside their faction.
No, sure.
Especially for 300 points.
Yeah, and if you want to play the Purple Sun, it's great. I mean, but there is the problem that you are a melee army, and the Purple Sun is going to get you too.
Yeah, you got to play.
So
You got to really watch out how you use it.
it's very difficult to charge a unit of any size of 10 Source Knights, especially into something and be able to tag the thing you're hitting, but not tag yourself with the Purple Sun.
Yeah.
You also would then need to be playing like the Astrolith Bearer to extend the range of the Purple Sun. You don't have to, but you have that option. You can get plus 6 inches to the cast range of the Purple Sun, which is something they changed in this GHB, which probably shouldn't have, but they're not the only ones that do it. I think the Ossiarch Bone Reapers with Archon, I think it's Archon that has like plus 6 inch command ability for spells.
Yeah, Lord Arcanum as well, I think it is, or there's a Stormcast hero that can extend the range slightly. But
Right.
if you're going to bring the Purple Sun, you need to really lift the model, like the unit that you're going into. Otherwise, yeah, they're gonna reap the -1 to your save bonus against you as well.
Right.
Before I get into Saurus Knights, this is actually probably a good transition question too, coming from King, because King, being new to AU Sigma, asking, is there a new General's Handbook coming out? And I don't want to buy something to be replaced. And the answer is yes at the moment. Normally the General's Handbook, and this actually is a nice segue question because of Saurus Knights and the value in the GHB, is traditionally the General's Handbook is a 12-month book. In this particular year, they've broken up into 6-month books. So the June was the release of the General's Handbook. So we can anticipate somewhere between December and January, there'll be a new book. Nothing has been formally announced, but we can expect it. Now,
the big caveat there is the battle scroll was about a month late. So we're probably looking at this new GHB also being several weeks pushed. So they're not going to do anything on the holidays. You're not going to see it on the 25th. So either it's going to be the week before Christmas. It might show up the week between Christmas and New Year's. Otherwise, it's going to be like the first or second week of January.
Look, if you don't see it announced in the next week or two, assume that it's not coming out till like mid-January. So we don't know yet, but the reason it's a good segue question is you don't see Saurus Knights very often. Prior to this General's Handbook, you didn't really see them at all. Yes, Thunder Lizards really boost up the jaw attacks, and there's some great things, but cavalry in general hasn't really... Coalesced boosts up the jaw attacks, but people still preferred Skinks and Saurus Warriors on foot. Why Saurus Knights? Why reinforced? Because they're not going to get bonds of battle, so they're not going to be able to maximize their attacks. Are they just this current General's Handbook, or are they something that you would think about when we move into a new General's Handbook?
Okay, so the Saurus Warriors by themselves are basically Saurus Knights. Once you're in Coalesced, the Saurus Knights or Saurus Warriors if you have 15 or more, they get +1 to their Celestite weapon. So they have 1 attack each. If you got 20 of them, that ends up being 40 attacks because you get the extra attack in there. So you have 40 Celestite attacks and then 20 Jaws attacks. That's 60 attacks, 61 attacks with the leader, whatever. With Saurus Knights in any capacity, they don't need to have a number. It's not like you have 7 or more or whatever. Just they have 7 attacks a model. That's 70 attacks. The Jaws attacks are the guys biting is exactly the same. 5s and 4s, 2 attacks. So those 20 attacks are the same. The difference is that Saurus Warriors have Rend, and especially with this GHB allowing them to be bond battle brothers,
the
bonds of battle.
The bonds of battle.
Yeah, the bonds of battle. They have actually Rend because now you're playing Warblades, which and then you can actually get your Warblades with -1 Rend. So there is Rend in there, and that's not bad. So you have 41 attacks with -1 Rend, but you're still hitting on 4s and 3s. And especially if you're playing in Thunder Lizard, they're just 4s and 3s. If you're playing in Kotal's Claw, that's 3s and 3s when you're charging. So that's actually pretty good. Now, if you go to the Saurus Knights, they have War Spears, and when they charge, they do +1 damage. And they have 2 attacks a model. So you end up with 10 of them, you've got 20 War Spear attacks. And then you also have 30 mount bites, and the mounts hit on 3s and 4s, so 2s and 4s when you're charging. None of this has rend, but you have a much higher damage potential. You just have more attacks. They're better quality attacks, and on the charge, they're doing two damage each. And then bounty hunters, 3 damage each, 2 damage each across the board. And the big thing is all you care about is number of attacks. You're going to put poison weapons from the Skink Star Priest on one of these units. You're going to send them in. 20 attacks hitting on 3s, or 21 attacks hitting on 3s. 7 of them are going to miss. And then 14 are going to go to wound. That's 14 attacks potential for poison. 2s and 4s for 30 of the attacks. 25 of 24 of them are going through. Again, so now you're at 38 potential for poison attacks. And then you still have the guys biting on 4s and 4s, which is whatever. That's another 20 attacks. So 10 more are going through. So talking like almost 50 attacks rolling for poison.
And just for the benefit of anyone who maybe don't know what you're talking about, what's the poison attack?
The Star Priest can pick any Seraphon unit, not just Skinks, which a lot of people think it's just Skinks, which is why you see 30 blocks of Skinks with the poison. And that means 6s to wound for that unit for all of their attacks, whether it's ranged or melee, whatever, do a mortal wound in addition to the damage. So if you think that a 30 block of Skinks, with poison is good, they're going to average 8 mortal wounds, 6 to 8 mortal wounds with Skinks. You're looking at 9, 10 with just much better damage attacks on the other side with better wounding rolls and everything else. So it's that's one of the reasons to play Knights. You just have so many attacks. They're good attacks. In Kotal's Claw, they're very accurate attacks, and you're getting a lot of poison. If you have anything worse than a 4+ save, you're just going to die. Even unbuffed, it doesn't matter. Even without poison, you're just going to lose to this unit. And which a lot of people don't really understand is that if you're not Stormcast and these things hit you, they're going to pick you up.
Mm.
And that's unbuffed. You don't need to do anything to them. You don't need to get plus to wound with the Sunblood. You don't need poison with the Star Priest. You don't need all out attack because you can't have it. The Scarvet can give you 6 exploding 6s with 70 attacks. Oh my goodness. You can have the best time of your life.
So then I'm going to ask. Sorry, continue.
So I was going to say that's why Saurus Knights is because inside of Coalesced, they're the highest damage potential unit in the battle line section, possibly the Codex. Honestly, I mean, Salamanders on 6 is a wildly different discussion, but normal things looking for normal hit and roll results, like you're not going to get a higher damage potential in the book. Maybe if you stack all the buffs on Skink Chief on Stegodon, because that thing can get like 70 attacks or some nonsense by itself with the Beastmaster and the Asterism and the Mount trait as well, or General trait, which affects the Mount. So that's why the Saurus Knights, they're also not Galatian Vets. They're not eating the Bounty Hunter. You're -1 damage from everything because you're a Saurus unit, which is another reason not to play Skinks at all in a Coalesced faction. Because if you're playing Sauruses, this was a change in the
there's an FAQ.
Scroll.
Yeah,
there's a battle scroll change that made it Coalesced Scaly Skin doesn't affect Skinks and Slann, but it affects all your Saurus and all your monsters and your Kroxigor, which no one plays. So just your Saurus and your monsters. So when people are coming with multi-damage, 2 damage especially is like the worst position for a lot of armies, and you'll never hear your opponent stop complaining about it. Once they learn that all their attacks are doing 1 damage, like it doesn't stop. It's just nonstop. You know this is busted, right? Yes, I'm fully aware. I know it's going to change. I get it.
I don't know if it will change, but I must say that there's nothing that makes me more pleased than seeing a Kronspine go into Saurus Knights, because it's the only quality target for it, or you pin it down, and because you're reducing the damage by 1 and you can tank up really well, 220 points can hold up a 500-point Kronspine for turns. And it's interesting because when I was building, I mentioned earlier, I built myself a Thunder Lizard 2nd edition, but off the back of 2 of the Broken Realms boxes. Yep. I remember doing the maths and noticing that Saurus Knights in the Coalesced would have 7 attacks. Yep. Problem is, a reinforced unit of 10, you don't really always get your 10 attacks. Like it sounds great in theory, but because of the range, you get 6 on average, 5, 6.
Well, you've got to consider flower power. You got to understand geometry. So if you put your bases in at an angle, I don't wish I had some Saurus guard bases around me, but I don't. But you can angle them so that they're incoherent. Like three of them can be just at an angle. Like you just make like a flower petals. They can be within an inch across. Just three guys can all be in 1 inch of each other. So you just do flower power on either side, string it. I mean, I've only ever had two guys be out. Like even against a short line, like if you can fit the bases across, you can get almost as many guys in as you have models. Honestly, so that's a big. And even with the gore gruntas, same thing. Like actually, if you got like six pigs, they can do the same thing with flower power. Like two threes, they can all get in with their 1 inch reach.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
you see, I call it the dog paw because you got the little base, and then you have like the
sure.
three. What I'm calling out though is that 10 isn't as easy to get all into combat, and you've got to position and deploy very well. Gore grunters are easier. You got 6 or you've got 3, but
their bases are bigger though. But the big thing is you don't need all 10. The reality of the situation is you don't need all 10, and when you do need all 10, you can usually get it. Like if it's a monstrous base, you can easily get all 10. Like easily get all 10. If you're not walled in on either side, you can get all 10. You only need 8, 9 most of the time anyway.
And what I wanted to mention about that is when I looked at it in second edition going into third edition, it was good. Like, was it great? Probably not. But I think this particular General's Handbook has really increased the value because of bounty hunters. And as you've mentioned, you can get it up to 3 damage. And the beautiful thing is you can deny GV, so you don't have to worry about getting 2 damage returned back to you from bounty hunters themselves. But
and you're also -1 native damage, which is, I mean, there's nothing more tanky than the Saurus right now, really. Like the Saurus Knights are just so tanky. It's kind of ridiculous.
It's an incredible trade-off piece. You can have 220 points, have a big, large footprint on the table, and you can take down or you can kill a lot more than they're worth. Or you can tie up. Yeah. You can defensively tie up across the board and deny your opponent for rounds if you play it smart.
Yeah, the in my second game against Matt Sweeney, he had the 4 fulminators, and the Scarvet, just the Scarvet, fought the full unit of fulminators for 4 turns before dying, and it's so silly. Like, I mean, I maneuver a little bit to kind of keep the fulminators out of combat, but just the Scarvet by himself, they only do 1 damage. The jaws attacks only do 1 damage. It's like, all right, let's just sit here for the rest of our lives, me and you. And that's the same thing happens with the Knights. There's a lot of armies that really rely on their multi-damage attacks, their high rend to just get through things, and they just can't against a lot of the pieces in this army.
So tell me then, if we move to a new General's Handbook and Bounty Hunters is no longer around, GVs no longer around, Bonds of Battle no longer around, and obviously we don't know what the new GBH looks like and the incentives, right, but just assuming that those 3 things disappear alone, do you see a world where you will continue with Saurus Knights, or is its value tied to bounty hunters, and without bounty hunters, they're just not worth the investment?
I won't say they're tied to bounty hunters. I will say they're tied to the meta. I don't know if you remember the end of the previous GHB where it was all swarms all the time. 120 zombies or something. Zombies, rats, whatever, just things that couldn't be moved, didn't make bravery checks or could auto pass bravery checks easily. And they're just, can you do this amount of wounds? Can you kill a Gargant that costs 100 points every turn for the rest of this game in order to score anything? And if that's the case, yeah, they're still going to be great. Like they were really good at the end of that meta for that exact reason, because again, 10 Saurus Knights by themselves with just 2 and 1 damage will kill a whole ton of zombies and skeletons and everything else. They do a really good job there. But if it really depends on what they change things into. If we go into a meta that doesn't have Galatian vets, obviously doesn't have bounty hunters, doesn't have any of that, but it doesn't favor smaller, stronger units, like doesn't favor Stormcast, for instance, which none of these GVs really have, or battle GHBs have favored Stormcast yet. So it'd be nice to see like MSU kind of be favored in some way.
But I will say, we know the next two battle tomes are Gits and Beasts of Chaos. So
yeah.
will they bring the Horde back?
Right. And so that's the thing, is like they're meta dependent. I think a lot of the big thing about Seraphon is they do everything just a little bit above average. So if you're looking for a unit to handle anything, it's probably in the Seraphon Codex. But we'd have to see what the changes are. If swarms come back, they're still going to be your best choice for clearing out that amount of power. If we start going to big, tall monsters like behemoths or something else, probably not. Try to find something with rend, and there's not a lot of rend in the book. You got to go towards mortal wounds and finding a different way. Maybe play double star priest to get double poison, 2 units with poison. I don't know. It changes a lot what your list is going to look like. But I only build to the meta. I don't build to just build a list because it looks fun to play. That's not true. I do have monster mash, just 4 or 5 stegodons and some troglodons and bastillodons, just push my monsters around the board for fun.
Last question about the Saurus Knights. I'm just curious, given that Suns, you talked about volume and damage and rend, how do the Saurus Knights go against Mega Gargants?
You can, with the list can clear a Gargant a turn comfortably, very comfortably clear a Gargant a turn. They have a 4+ save, especially the babies. The babies are the worst. Like, I don't know why they don't have a 4+ save. It's really sad. I don't get that at all. But babies just die. But the Mega Gargants with the 4+, especially, and they've got they have their artifact that's like a 6+ ward or something, or a general trait that's a 6+ ward.
Yeah, they can get a 6+ ward. They can get 40 wounds. Like, there's a couple of little flexes there.
But yeah, you can easily kill a Gargant a turn without too much difficulty. Just the volume of attacks that you can put out. Their save is very medium, and they've only got all out defense. So if you put a minus on them from a Starseer, you hit them with some number of spells. The Scarvet also does 5 damage on his bite at the top level. You can very easily clear a Gargant a turn. The question is, can you take objectives while you're doing that? Can you actually play the game while you're doing that? And that's always the question with Gargants. I find it to be a very 50-50 matchup. I always have, because they're going to send a Gargant at you. You're going to try to kill it. You're going to kill it, but did you take the objectives that they're just sitting on waiting for you back there with their 9,000 models or whatever? And
it's interesting, is that because like I'm playing Gargants at the moment, despite what Cheeky is talking about. Did I mention I'm playing cities yet? Nope, I'm playing Gargants, and I'm back to my Gargants because I'm taking to LVO. But with Gargants, like if I go into your Saurus Knights, they're my only real threats. If I can take out those 2 units of Saurus Knights, I feel relatively okay actually with my Suns army standing on objectives. And
I haven't played the new Suns, and the new Suns are lower attacks but higher damage, right?
Yeah, you've got a little bit less rend. You have a little less attacks, but the attacks, instead of doing like damage 1, damage 2, they spike quite, damage 2, damage 4, damage 5. So
I actually think the matchup might have flipped to be more in their favor, because my -1 to damage is worse now because you have less 2 damage attacks, less D3 attacks, and you've got more whatever higher than 2 damage attacks. Because once you start doing like 3, I'm only reducing your damage by 33%, 4, 25%, etc., etc., etc. What is the Gargant ability where you can forego attacking but do like 4d6 mortal wounds? Because I saw in the best general bracket, the best overall bracket, the Gargants player kept doing that and was like chucking Varangard across the board, and it was the funniest thing in the whole wide world.
I've done it once only, so the Gatebreaker can sacrifice its attacks to, on a 4+ do 4d6 mortal wounds, and I did 20 mortal wounds to a Stardrake. Now, granted, there was protectors in there as well, so they kind of took on some of the damage, but it's a 50-50. Like if I roll a 1 to a 3, it does literally nothing.
Yes.
So
it's not good against my guys. You can just hit my guys and they'll die. They've just got normal saves, whatever. But if you're dealing with like Varangard, especially the current Varangard, which are like 2+ with re-rolling 1s or whatever, just
speak of the devil, my opponent's in the chat. Hey. he's he's the one. I've done it once. It's actually funny because I actually wasn't going to do it, and he baited me to do it, and I did it, and I did 20 mortal wounds. So, not a bad roll. But the reason I bring up Gargants is not to talk about myself, but to talk about. You've talked about volumes of attacks. You have great ability to chip damage and to pull down minor heroes and to, great to pull down castles, right? Your Tzeentch, your Lumineth, all these little armies that rely on 4 wound, 5 wound idiots. You've got the great tools.
Yes.
But can you do the DPS check to pull down a 35 to 40 wound Mega Gargant sitting on the objective? And I wanted to call out that I think the Saurus Knights, in combination with like the Prime and things, are the tools that are going to help you to do that.
I mean, everyone talks about hammers and anvils. They're both. The Saurus Knights are both. They're your hammers and your anvils. They're your screens, and they're also the guys that are going to do all your damage. And like I said, on average, they're getting 50-something wound rolls out of their 70 attacks, especially if you hit them with Hand of Glory rerolling ones, then that number just becomes whatever absurd number that you want it to be. So that's really all I can say about that is like you really do have the damage, especially because Gargants are on big bases. You're going to probably get most of the 10 squad in there. You're going to get the charge because Gargants can only do one thing, and that's walk towards you. You're not going to give up too many charges to them. But every once in a while, they roll a 12 in a charge, and then you feel really bad as the crushing bulk or whatever destroys you.
But I can colossal slam your Carnosaur as well, which I want to talk about. I do want to talk your Carnosaur before I get into some of the matchups, because I am curious how you're thinking as well about the new General's Handbook. I'm thinking about the new Battle Tome that is likely going to be coming. What's the role of the Carnosaur? Because again, you don't see it that often. Because like whenever I fought against the Carnosaur, like I haven't been that impressed. But then I remember it's only 200 points. Like it's actually not a bad for its price. I always think it's like a 400-point hero, but it's not.
Yeah, it's a glass cannon, just missing the cannon for the most part. The reason you take it is because you have to take the eviscerating blade. It's relatively cheap. It's a monster. It lets you do monstrous rampages. There's no other monsters in the list. You do want one. He has the most number of attacks with the War Spear or Warblade, as the list says. Either one has 6 attacks for the eviscerating blade, which is a lot of times like, you'll spike 6s and you can be like, all right, because you have your Asterism for +1 attack. Your Beastmaster can give you +1 attack. You end up with 8 attacks with this thing pretty easily. You can, 3 6s is 6 mortal wounds in addition. You're going to kill a lot of models, units, whatever. And it has 5 damage at top level on its bite. That used to be last season. It was more impressive because we had the command ability that a monster would fight at its top level.
Yes.
So that was really cool to be able to do that. We don't have that anymore. So he's a lot worse. But the big thing that he does is he doesn't die super easily. He takes a lot more damage than he should because of the -1 damage, the scaly skin, give him finest hour, whatever. He's on a 3+ save pretty consistently. And if you're near terrain, you do get the 6-up mystical, especially if you're in your own territory. What I do with him is break Beastmaster for the run charge. Beastmaster has 2 modes for those watching. You can either use it for running and charging once, or you can use it for +1 to all of your attack profiles for a turn. So you can just use it for the run charge, auto run him the 6 inches with himself. Dominant Predator is the command trait that whenever you target a Saurus with one of his command abilities on a 4+, you get your command point back. So you auto run him 4+, you get the command point back. You rally your guys 4+, you get the command point back. You all out defense one of the guys that's being shot 4+, you get your command point back. It just makes you extremely, extremely command point efficient as long as you're targeting Saurus units, which you can always find a way to do it. And amusingly, you can do heroic the +1 command point for a model. Heroic willpower. No, that's the deny.
Right.
Right.
Heroic recovery is healing. Heroic leadership.
Yeah, I think that's the one. So actually, so you use that on, like, say you give them the first turn, use heroic leadership in your rally phase. You say, I'm going to stop these guys from running away. They don't need a thing. On a 4+, you get to keep that free command point. It becomes a real one. So
I love it.
It's just little silly crap like that you can do. But mostly you just give them the run charge, you move them up 16 inches, you make the short charge. Usually it's 6 inches or less, depending on the deployment. And he hits something. He usually kills it because you're not going to hit something you're not going to kill, ideally. and then they have to spend a lot of their resources on that turn dealing with that unit. That's a lot of the ways that you can win some games. Notice that the list is 7 drops. So the breaking points in Sigmar is 1 drop, 4 drop, 7 drop. In my opinion, those are the 3 big breaking points: 1, 4, and 7. So either you're taking a command entourage for an artifact, or you're taking, and then you're doing that plus bounty hunters, and you get to 7. So if you're in those breaking points at 7 drops, I felt that I'd be being forced to go first a lot of the time. The Starseer gives you a 3d6 to your charge, gives you a 3d6 charge instead of a 2d6 charge at 18 inches. So you can get your Source Knights in there, you move them up 8, then you get your 3d6 charge off. The Source Scarvet can go 16 and then charge. So you can usually hit with a 10 block and a Source Scarvet on turn 1 if you're forced to go first. And by the time they clear that out, same thing as the Gargant problem. What have they done? Can they get the points? Can they do enough damage to DPS check you to get to the objectives? And a lot of times the answer is no. They'll lose a point here, lose a point there. They might get 1-2, but not more. They might not get their battle tactic, whatever the case may be. So that's what you're looking to do with the Scarvet, is just be a nuisance. And a lot of people are afraid of it. They put a lot of firepower into taking this thing down, or they set up a lot of things to make sure it's dead, and it's not really worth much to me. Like it's
a great trade piece, and in most cases it's a distraction, because whenever I played against a Carnosaur, whether it's the Old Blood or the Scarvet, you put him on a flank and it's up on the board, and you either ignore it and you risk the threat, or you deal with it, all while the Star Master's doing its thing, the Knights are doing its thing, the Skinks are doing its thing.
Yep.
And it does make a tough conversation. And I think what I'm hearing from you is, normally, given that you're 7 drops, if I saw this list on average, you go first. You don't have the power to get in front of me. The average, you do some chip damage, but you don't have like range 24. You're not, dropping from the sky, doing serious damage. But then you add in the 3d6 charge. Then you add in the run and charge. All of a sudden, you've got some tools to do some damage early on. Or if you go second, you can make some serious. Yeah, you've got some great tools.
And it's worth noting that every single one of my opponents had more than 7 drops at the event. So I always got to choose. They always went first. I double turned the Skaven guy twice, for sure. I didn't double turn Tom. So I did double turn Crucial twice, and Sweeney I did not double turn, I don't believe. So I was 50% on double turns, and a lot of armies can't take a double turn at any point. And I think Skaven being one of those, especially if their Alpha Strike doesn't go well, which if we can talk about those later, but Matthias's his Alpha Strikes did not go well for him. Which I think is one of the reasons I was able to win those games, just because he wasn't able to do what his list was obviously designed to do.
Is there anything else you want to add to this list? Because I do want to show off a couple of your opponents and just get some of your thinking around how you handled it, and then kind of wrap it up with some extra questions. But is there anything else that you think is worth calling out?
I think we talked about the Star Master. If you don't know what a Slan does, I mean, you can't be helped at this point. The model is absolutely insane. It's an auto include in every single Seraphon list forever. You deny board wide, you're always +1. And the Comet's Call is just a kind of insane spell. It's like 5 mortal wounds on average or something, between being D3 or D6, and your pluses to cast that you very easily can get. So
I was playing with it as an ally, my Stormcast ally. I'm like, this is because you can't ally Seraphon into many other armies other than like Seraphon. It's a Stormcast, and I'm like, this is good with the spell, the board wide denial, the CP generation. For 285, like, get it on, especially if I've got like arcane terrain, I can just do absolute terror to my opponent.
Yes. Yeah, it's like I said, I think in the beginning, I think it's the best defensive caster in the game. Because you never have to expose it. It never has to be in danger. It sits in his little tower of power, or he sits in arcane terrain the whole game. doing whatever you do at any range, never worrying about what the opponent's doing, especially with the Saurus guard sitting nearby. It's very, very difficult to remove. Probably easily one of the most powerful things in this army. And it just went up 20 points as well. Go ahead.
Do you see a world where you would never take, like you would drop the Star Master?
No. I mean, I've played games without him. Like I said, I played the Open in New Orleans without him, and I mean, for the exact same cost of the Troglodyte at the time. Now the Troglodyte has gone down in points, and this guy's gone up in points, but it's still, you can't play without a Slann. Just all the versatility it adds and defensive capabilities to make sure that your opponent's not getting away with anything. And a lot of armies are just trying to get away with something via whatever, whether it's Laocoon with Thanquol or some other spell, some teleport, some whatever. A lot of people are building their armies around some spell, something they're trying to get off, especially in the Purple Sun meta. Everyone's just trying to be like, I'm going to Purple Sun you. And you're like, well, I'm +2 to dispel. So no, that's not going to happen today.
Yeah, I played around with the Rune Lord for a +2. I went to like the Knight Incantor to get a once per game auto unbind, but the multiple unbinds and the casting of a Star Master along with the other abilities, like it's always one of the first choices on the roster. I think it's I don't want to call it an auto include, but
I will.
You better have a bloody good plan if you're not taking the Star Master. It's just it's good for its points.
Yeah, nothing is going to have the output that he does. Like I said, it's just kind of crazy the abilities that has. The Scarvet we talked about, the Starseer, again 3d6 charge, as well as the spell that lets you give rend to anything within 18 inches. And this guy is always moving up the field because the 3d6 charge aura is only 12 inches wholly, and it's in your charge phases when you pick it. So he's kind of got to like keep up with the things. So he's always up the field. The Star Priest gives you venom, poison attacks, and everything else we've already talked about. The Chameleon Skinks are there to score you battle tactics and do chip mortal wounds. Every once in a while they'll spike, but the most part they're doing 1 to 2 mortal wounds and shooting plus whatever they get through in their honestly pretty reasonable 3s and 4s profile for 1 damage.
They're not battle line, are they?
They're not. No.
Okay, so they're not counting as G, because if they're not counting for proving ground. So
correct. Yeah, you can't. The only thing that can take a proving ground is the Saurus guard, and that comes up constantly. But a lot of other lists, especially, are in that same problem where proving grounds are just, you just got to deal with the fact that you sometimes can't take an objective.
Yeah. Like I said, my Gargants couldn't care less.
Right.
So let's quickly go through some of your matchups, right? So this was the round you went up against Tom Guan first. So Seraphon versus Daughters of Cain. So here's the list. What were some of the tools, or is there anything that you'd want to talk about with this list and how you kind of pulled it apart, or any highlights or any maybe learnings that you'd want to share with people?
So the big thing about Tom Guan's list is that everything in his list can run in charge, in one way or another. Everything he has can run in charge. The Heart of Fury is very good because it gives him the coalesced buff of -1 damage to everything within its aura, which is 12 inches. It can't move, so once you place it, it just stays there. So you drop it in the middle of the board somewhere, and you try to keep the fights centralized wherever you're putting it. So that's the big thing to notice with the Heart of Fury. But everything else can run in charge. And his list is basically my list exactly, but they're not as durable. And his support heroes are also very weak. So my support heroes are also low wounds, high saves. His support heroes are low wounds, high saves as well. And I can get to him. I have ranged attacks. I dropped in the Celestin Prime to try to snipe out heroes with the Comet's Call, with the Chameleon Skink. So I was able to just kill a lot of his stuff. His general has the Zealous Orator, which is a 4+ rally. So if you take out a lot of these support heroes, his list there's not much to it after that. All of these things are Galatian vets. So every single thing he has is taking bonus damage from my guys. And if they're not inside the Heart of Fury buff, they're just getting completely cleared off the table. I mean, they're getting cleared off the table without the Bounty Hunters buff anyway, because just the volume of attacks is more than they have wounds. But they do have some cool things with like Bladed Bucklers. They're doing wounds back to you. If they're in the Heart of Fury, they're taking 1 less damage. Their save is 1 better while they're within 18 inches of the Cauldron of Blood. Maybe it's only 12.
Yeah. No, it's 18.
Huh?
It's 18 until it starts taking damage. The damage really is coming from the Blood Sisters, who on, as you mentioned, the 4-up will get the rally. All of them get 4-up rally, but
right.
the Blood Sisters as well have the Crystal Touch. So at the end, after they fought, they can roll a dice for each model in the unit, and they can do some mortal wounds. So it can be some serious damage. And then the Witch Elves are super fast, lots of attacks. The high gladiatrix, the Mrs. Whippy, she can give extra rend. So all of a sudden, the Witch Elves could just do a industrial amount of damage.
The big thing with her is that you can't inspiring presence. You can't stop the running away. You can't within 9 inches. It's not holy either. Just if she's touching you within 9 inches, you can't stop the battle shock test, which is huge.
And if she kills something, that bubble turns to 15 inches, I think it is. So
that's not really an issue, because if she's close enough to kill something, she's much too close to die.
But I think your list is perfect because, again, Comet's Call and some of the mortal wounds. You know, I run a list not like this, but I do use that combination. I think most Daughters of Cain players use Zealous Orator and Crown of Woe. I put it on my Cauldron of Blood, which is a much more durable hero, much bigger bubble. But you have the ability to pull down these 5-wound idiots because of the amount of mortal wounds. So it's a nice little target those heroes, and then the power of this army just... Is that what happened? Like, it collapsed?
Long story short is that's kind of what happened. Is I was able to get enough things away from the bubble to kind of push them out. I made him go first. He didn't charge me at all. Didn't really even try. He just kind of moved everything into his bubble and down one of the 2 flanks. I think this was the L deployment. So we were close to the vest, close to the chest, maybe. So we were pretty close to each other, and he just moved to the 2 flank objectives, just took those, and just kind of chilled like that. And everything that was outside of the bubble died just instantly. The Sisters of Slaughter have a 6-inch pile in. There's just a lot of tricks that this army has that I had the benefit of going in, reading his list, knowing exactly what it did, what I needed to do. And we talked about it after the game. We both came to the same conclusion, is that we're playing the same list. He's a little bit faster. He can get to combat more because all his things can run and charge. But without the Heart of Fury to defend them and protect them, it doesn't really matter that they can get to combat quicker because they're just going to die. And his support heroes, he has no way to get to my support heroes. He can't kill the Slan. He can't kill the Skink Star Priest or the Starseer because he can't get to them. And I can get to his guys. So that's really all it was. It's just he couldn't get to my support heroes. Well, so I was able to get all the charges I wanted, all the combats I wanted. The Celestant Prime fought a Cauldron of Blood as long as the Cauldron of Blood was allowed to fight it, which wasn't nearly as long as it would have liked. But and there's no reason to hold it in there. Like, you're either doing 9 wounds max or 15 wounds max, and there's not too many things in his list that even has 9 wounds. So you do 9 wounds to a unit, they're mostly dead pretty much across the board. So there's no real reason to hold them in there. Just get your mortal wounds out as quickly as you can to kill off the support heroes. Like I said, this was a very straightforward matchup, and I think Tom going into it, like we both play tested it. I'm sure. I know I play tested it a few times, and we had exactly the same thoughts. Just I'm a little bit more durable than he is, and he doesn't have the range to get to my stuff.
So just to summarize the match and maybe the learnings from this, if somebody was to play a list like this, the goal really would be to pull down those support heroes, especially the Zealous Orator. That's like number 1. Pull down Zealous Orator, remove the 4-up rally. If you can pull down those minor heroes, and that is Daughters of Cain, they really supercharged Daughters of Cain. If you can pull them down quickly, you then have the tools in the ability, especially the reducing damage by 1. You can handle their offense way more than they can handle yours. Heart of Fury is a bit hard because it's a prayer, so it becomes very hard to get rid of it.
Yeah, honestly, I was hoping that when he cast it, it would just roll a 6 on his combat when he wasn't fighting. I think it would just go away because I can't deal with it. So the Heart of Fury on 1+, it just does what it does, which is -1 to the damage that they take within 12. And on a 6, they also get +1 to all of their attack profiles. But the heart disappears at the end of that phase. So, and he's a lot of buffs to praying. So the Hag Queen is a +1 to praying, and the Avatar is +1 to praying.
It gives them a lot of prayer boosts. So they'll be praying on 2s.
2s across the board for all of their prayers. Yeah, there's some really good prayers in there.
And shutting down Mind Razor obviously is key because that gives -1. It gives them +1 Rend to their attack. So those Witch Elves with the high Gladiatrix will be like Rend 2 on like industrial amount. Like I think they're 2 attacks each. Double Blades is 3 attacks, but otherwise 2 attacks. But that's the lesson here: is taking on the support heroes, especially some of those critical ones. And this list becomes hard to pilot.
Yeah. It's a lot of stacking auras and stacking buffs that if you can remove them, it doesn't really survive.
In the humblest way. The second, so you've won that match against Tom. Tom drops to the loser bracket and gets to fight Emma Mengels, while you progress to the winners bracket and you play against Matt Sweeney and his Stormcast Eternals.
Yes.
So here's a Stormcast Eternals list. You Bastian, you've got the Lord Castellan, so you can have +1 to save with the Lantern. You've got like a Griff Charger. You got some Dracothian Guard Fulminators. You got Raptors. You've got a bunch of Liberator idiots and the Aether Wings who boost up the Vanguard Raptors with a +1 to hit it if you're within range of the Aether Wings.
Right. So this battle plan was in the presence of idols. So after deployment, pick 3 units that are on the battlefield to be your idols. If your idol kills one of their idols, or vice versa, you get +1 point, or they get +1 point for the turn. And that's not capped, but it only starts on turn 2 and after, I believe. Maybe it's not start turn 2, but doesn't matter. Not really important. The big thing to note is that he put the Vanguard Raptors with Long Strike and Deep Strike, so they couldn't be idols. So that kind of sucked for him a little bit. Obviously, my Celestin Prime also couldn't be an idol because
happens to me all the time. Like, damn it, like it's the perfect idol. By the way, just I should call out there's 2 holy commands. So this is a special Stormcast rule. The call for aid will allow him to bring back once per game with a command point one of those Liberator units. And then Steadfast March is what is a reroll charge or something once per game. I can't remember what Steadfast does.
That's run and charge.
Run and charge. I remember there was some movement shenanigans on it.
So this was again a diagonal deployment, and we had the 3 objectives going the opposite ways across. And I made one of them a proving ground because I needed to have the Liberators come out of the sky. That was the only reason. I needed the Liberators down because I needed to limit his options later in the game to contest objectives. I just needed to have all the things I needed to fight be fighting me. His drops was like 10, I believe, so I made him go first. I made the one thing a proving ground, and I thought for sure he was going to give the Dracothian Fulminators run charge, move them up, whatever, and then charge me. He didn't do that. I mean, it's a little bit unreliable because you can't give them run charge and also auto run because they're both in the same phase. But he didn't do that regardless, then failed the charge with the Fulminators, so they never got to do Fulminator things.
Yeah.
He put them right on the line, and I put my guys just over a half-inch back off the line to make they move 10, so they need a 9-inch charge without the Steadfast March. He just moved up the full 10, needed the 9, failed the charge, failed the reroll. So he had just Fulminator sitting in the middle of the board. I mean, that's a lot of guys in the middle of the board, though. They're all 6 wounds, so they all count for 2, 8 models, whatever. And then he had
a lot of GVs, like all those Liberators are GVs. It might be worth calling out Signs of the Storm means that they can drop half their army from the sky coming from reserve. So it does make it an interesting challenge when you can put literally half of your army in reserve, drop them outside of 9 inches, jumping on objectives, denying like a first turn attack. You know, it can completely redeploy your whole army where if you go onto one objective, they can drop somewhere else. And the difference with a Fulminators need to charge, right? On the charge, they do way more damage.
3.
Yeah. Well, when they don't charge, they do damage 1. So failing that charge is so important. Important to you. It sucks for them.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do everything I could to incentivize them into blowing the Steadfast March. I mean, again, you don't want to ever be doing the 9-inch charge, even with rerolls. You don't want to be doing that. So I thought for sure he was going to use the Steadfast March and send them in at least a 1 inch closer, make it an 8-inch up to, you know, a 3-inch charge or whatever it would be if they got the full 6. So I think that was kind of a mistake because he never used the steadfast march for the rest of the game. There's nothing else that really needed it. But yeah, I mean, I think there was some conversation about it later in the game, but I think they would have changed things up a little bit. Anyway, he got stuck in the middle of the board, and I was able to just outmaneuver him. I stuck a Carnosaur into the fight with the Fulminators, and because of how he had ended up redeploying and everything else, I was able to keep it so he could only fight me with 1 or 2 Fulminators the entire time we were in combat. Just maneuvering them around because he was kind of stretched out in a line and with pile-ins and maneuvering around terrain and everything else, he just couldn't get to me, and it just took him far too long to just deal with that one stupid model that was actually killing them. It's just like, all right, they're on a 2+. Is this eviscerating blade good enough this time? Because he was not failing 1+, or he was not rolling ones for his saves to save his life. It's like they were lanterned and they were mystic shielded. I couldn't break through to save my life. Nothing. So it's just like eviscerating blade or nothing. And so I tied up them. The Raptors shot off. They killed one of my support heroes because that's what happens. Like, I think it was the Star Priest. It was the Star Priest, because otherwise I could have envenomed my attacks and then killed the Fulminators. So he knew what he was doing. He knew that my only way to damage his guys was with poison. So he killed that guy immediately. However, the Skinks, the Chameleon Skinks, killed them because Chameleon Skinks hate long strikes. They're all often in the open. They have a 4+ save. It's not getting better in a lot of cases. So even just the wounding is half of your wounds are going to go through, plus the poison shots. Like, just great. They just love killing those guys. So then there was just like a little bit of maneuvering around the Liberators and Call for Aid, because when the Liberators die, you can resummon them somewhere. So I just to make sure when they died that all of the objectives were zoned out, because they were Expert Conquerors. They don't come back as Expert Conquerors, but they do come back as GVs still, which can to be Proving Ground or something else, which ended up mattering a few times as Proving Grounds got shuffled and priority changed. So this is honestly, I really hate playing against Stormcast with my list because they've got every tool to beat me. They can long strike, shoot off my support heroes. They're all on 3+ saves across the board. The only downside for them is that the Liberators have the bad shield rule, the old shield rule where they get +1 to save rolls and not 3+ save. Whereas all the new X's, when they have a shield, their 4+ save becomes a 3+ save. So that they have built-in all-out defense, but against me, that doesn't matter. They can't also all-out defense to get down to a 2+.
Yeah,
which is really unfortunate for them. Because again, 5 knights kills 5 Liberators to a man very easily on the charge, especially when they're bounty hunters and they're Galatian vets.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see there that, like, almost 50% of that army is between the Dracothian Guard Fulminators and the Long Strikes. And then one of the big changes that people might not be aware of is that there used to be a holy command for Stormcast that allowed them to shoot once per game in the hero phase, which was brutal for Long Strikes. But if you they made a small change that if you reinforce those Long Strikes, you can't use that holy command. So it does make Long Strikes a little less scary, just a little, but it means that it's a lot of points still. And they can snipe that. If they go into the slant and maybe get the double turn, that's enough to probably, could kill it. Maybe.
I mean, it's very, very possible. The -2 rend is good. The big thing with the slant inside his pyramid is he's -2 to hit. So even with your Aether Wings +1, you need Aether Wings plus all out attack to get just to break even on hitting. So they do hit on 3s and then wound on 2s, which is very, very good. So it's not like they need too much help, but you can penalize them a little bit for shooting at the slan. It is 17 wounds, but if you double turn, but you'd need to be less than 10 drops if you want to be planning to double turn somebody with long strikes. And I think the big thing with the shooting holy command is that it often enticed people into taking the teleport hero, the prayer 2+ prayer to teleport, so you could keep them out of range of whatever was going to attack them, then send them forward into range to shoot. Now you just deep strike them, so you're not going to use the holy command anyway.
No. So what's the lesson? So just before we move on to the next round, what's the lesson here? If I'm a Seraphon player going up against Stormcast in a list like this, what's the lesson on taking it down?
It's a tough matchup. It's a very, very tough matchup. I think Fulminators are, of your Dracothian Guard, I think they're the ones you want to see the most, because if you can keep them from charging or you can lock them in combat, they're very miserable. They just all of their attacks do 1 damage. They've got 6 attacks a model. I think it's 5 with the spear and then 2 with the guy, so it's 7 attacks a model.
Is it
Or is it
5 on top? I think it's five for the Stormcast, and then it's 3 for the mount.
Yeah, that sounds right. So they have 8 attacks a model. And then some number of those are going to miss, whatever. So you're not taking too much damage. You just got to keep them from charging you, because even at 2 damage on their stabby sticks is. And then also once they get out of combat, they can breathe on the targets you don't want them breathing on. So you just gotta lock them up.
Which does mortal wounds for anyone who doesn't know. So
Yeah.
breathing is more than just like bad breath. They actually they do mortal wounds on a 4-up or something. But
yes, D3 on each model does that. So each model live is basically ends up being 1 mortal wound on average or something per model, just the way the math works out. But it's still very, very strong, and you want to keep that from hitting the things you don't want it to hit.
Yeah, so like a redeploy, for example, against Fulminators is definitely something you want to have up your sleeve, because if you can fail that charge, the output, and it's why actually Stormcast players are looking at concussors and some of the other options, because Fulminators are so reliant on the charge that there are other outputs. But should you fight against something like this, I think we've just heard a little bit about the long strikes, the Fulminators. Bastion is a great piece, but
he's slow.
He's slow.
He's slow. The big thing is he's slow. So I was able to very easily outmaneuver Bastion. He never got to fight anything he wanted, and then by the time he got to fight something, he had to fight the Prime. The Prime did end up dying, but not to Bastion. I ended up retreating from, not retreating, but I piled away from him to try to like keep an objective, and I ended up dying to like lay low the Tyrant or whatever from the Liberators, which was super embarrassing, but that's just the way it goes sometimes.
And if you have the ability to pull out the Lord Castello, who basically just does a free Mystic Shield, no roll required, that allows you, if you put that on the Dracothian Guard, they're charging up the board on like a 2-up save, then they hit you like a truck. They're just an absolute 6 wounds apiece. They hold you up. So I think you're hearing just how you can handle something like this. And I guess, again, Bounty Hunters, a lot of GVs in Stormcast at the moment, means you can really maximize your Bounty Hunters.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, is like a lot of their GVs don't have the good save rules. So like they're all stuck on 3+. They can't get to the 2+ that a lot of the heroes can get to. So you very easily clear their GVs. So the question in this fight is, can you do the damage you need to do to the things that matter? Like the Raptors are pretty easy to kill. You've got a lot of mobility. You can get to them very easily, whether you just want to kill them with the Celestian Prime, you want to shoot them with the Skinks, whatever you want to do. Any amount of shooting will just clear them off the board. The Fulminators, anything with a 3+ save, anything with it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a Chariot, whether it's Fulminators, whether it's Concussors, Annihilators, all of those things, they're going to be on a 2+ save against you, and they're very, very difficult to remove for my Seraphon list. Very difficult to remove.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of chip mortal wounds, but you don't have a lot of rend, and that's where again the Prime comes into play.
Yes, exactly right.
So you win that game. Matt Sweeney drops down to the loser bracket and plays Darren Watson's Khorne, while you progress into the semi-final and you play up against Skaven. So your Skaven opponent is here. So if anyone's interested, Matthias, I actually talked to him literally last week. Great discussion. And, you're looking at this, and if I just summarize it, Bounty Hunter giant rats are broken good. They're just very insane with the amount of damage that they can put out for 180 points. The Warp Lightning Cannons is something that I think people really need to think about, because they haven't really been very popular in the tournament scene just yet, but they're starting to reap incredible rewards. And for anyone who doesn't know how Warp Lightning Cannons are, basically you roll a dice, and that is your target dice number. So let's say I roll power level. It's the number that you're trying to go for. So you then get to roll a bunch of dice. It's usually six dice. You can supercharge it, but just 6 is the number. If I roll a 2 on that initial dice, every 2 up out of those 6 is going to be a mortal wound. Right. If I roll a 5 or a 6, it means they're going to do a bunch of nothing. But between the 3 warp lightning cannons, they can do incredible amounts of mortal wounds. And if I roll a 1, by the way, that's just a flat 6 mortal wounds. So
Yes.
brutal. Thankful can be like base 3 plus to cast and unbind. Narholes, which is their terrain feature, will give them +1. Arcane give them +1. So it's easy to see Thankful with like +4, +5. He can do incredible damage with the burninating shooting attack. The Verminlord Deceiver, great melee kind of monster, and the endless spell, the Soul Seeker, will teleport Thankful. Talk to me. That's just like the summary from the video. You can go watch it if you're interested in Skaven. But Dean, talk to me about this matchup, because funnily enough, before you talk, you played not once but twice. You played this list twice because of the way the brackets worked. Matthias dropped to the loser bracket, beat Matt Sweetie in the final, so he got an invitation back to play you in the grand final.
Right, exactly right. And he played Sweeney on camera, actually. So if you go back through the Warhammer TV on Twitch, you can go and check out that matchup. A lot of things went very badly for Sweeney in that matchup, including Bastion went into combat, didn't kill a single giant rat, which was, I was sitting in the hotel room watching on Twitch because I wanted to know who I was be playing next. And when I just saw that happen, I was just like, oh man. Because Bastion, for those who don't know, if he kills any models at the end of that phase, so he kills in shooting, he kills in combat, whatever, he heals back to full at the end of that phase. He didn't kill a single giant rat. Giant rats don't have saves.
Yeah, like 6 at best, if not nothing. Like he just whiffed. It was a massive whiff.
Yeah, and then so the giant rats did some number of wounds and he died, and it was just like, oh god. And couldn't get a double turn to save his life. Just couldn't get anything going his way. I think it was be a close matchup no matter what, but it was just really sad to just be like, oh man, just nothing's going to coming up for Swinny in that. So yeah, I got to play against Crucial twice, and honestly, it was like he was just so pleasant and a pleasure to play against both times. Truly, like just someone who knew everything that their army was doing, had a pretty good grasp on what my guys were doing. We didn't have any conversations about that. We did have conversations about like timing for takebacks, like what takebacks, how we handle takebacks and that sort of deal in the event. And like the way I handle it, what I told him is like, once you roll a die, we're done. Like we're not going back behind a die roll. Like once that sort of stuff changes, we're done. And he was cool with that. And that's just how I never ask for takebacks. So it doesn't affect me, but I just try to, like, especially in the best general bracket, like I try to keep things as, clean as they can possibly be. And I don't want it to come down to be like, feel bad for either person to be like, hey, do you mind if we go back to, I forgot to do this roll and whatever. I just keep that out of everybody's, go ahead.
No. I just wanted to reinforce that point, folks. If you're listening to this, regardless if you're Seraphon or not Seraphon, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The most important phase in the game is that first 5 minutes when you meet with your opponent, because we all play a different version of Warhammer. And it could be as simple as how do we determine dice if it doesn't land flat, like a terrain piece, for example? Getting those etiquettes out of the way so we all play the same game is so important. So and it avoids a lot of the issues that happen later on. Like if you don't have that conversation, that's when I find I have issues with an opponent because they thought something was going to happen, or in their club, they're allowed to do, they can take back moves as long as like I didn't move a model, or like, get the etiquette out of the way.
Yeah. And like for me, like as long as, especially if it's like not at the highest level, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. But once you're in a tournament, like we need to have some sort of guidelines on how far we're going to go back on things, what we're going to allow. And for me, it's like once we've moved on to something that can't be undone, especially like dice rolls, that's just it. Let's not be playing with things anymore after that. But
love it.
Back onto this list. This is a list that I looked at a lot because like a lot of the lists were pretty standard, bog standard for whatever, and this one was very interesting, and my group, we talked about it a lot. I didn't play the games against it because I wasn't sure I'd actually see it, but like a lot of the stuff was like really cool to read for the first time, like the Verminlord Deceiver, what Devious Adversary does, what the Shadow Magnet Trinket is, and all this sort of like just stuff that this war, that war scroll and plus all his abilities, man, that thing is frightening, a very frightening model. But in the game, The only thing that actually impressed me was those stupid giant rats. That's it. So in our first game, just the big things that actually mattered, and the reason I won is he did not cast Laucon in either game, and he did not cast Dreaded Skitterleap in either game.
Because of your magical supremacy, because of whips, because Thankful on average should be +4 to cast. If he's
he was +4 both games.
Correct. I mean, like you can get +5. I've had Thankful
Yeah.
on +5, but on average it's a +4 to cast. So
Yeah.
it's pretty likely that, I mean, Flaming Weapon on the Vermin Lord Deceiver is against you is a lot harder. But you would imagine the Soul Seeker, if what he wanted to cast, it'll happen.
Yeah, so what ended up happening is like his dice rolls were not bad. If that's a story anybody's telling, his dice rolls weren't bad. My dice rolls weren't amazing, nothing like that. The big thing is he would cast Mystic Shield on a 14 and then cast Laucon on like a 7. And I think in one of the games he didn't actually he failed to cast Skitterleap in one of them. I didn't have to dispel it or anything, but I did dispel the other 3 things in the across the 2 games. He rolled really well on like Mystic Shield, Levitate, Flaming Weapon, rolled really, really high numbers. And there's like, all right, those happen. And then he'd roll very, very poorly for like the teleports. And if you look at this list, it's very obvious what this list is doing, and it's alpha striking you. Not only does he want to go first, he's built to go first. And he's playing like 11 drops, I think, 10 or 11 drops, just well more than me.
Yeah, there's no battle regiment here. It's just pure drops.
Yeah. And the big thing is this list is a list that cannot survive a double turn. And it certainly won't survive a double turn if it doesn't get the Alpha Strike to go its way. And in game 1, he sent the giant rats through the gnaw hole into a 10 block of knights. He picked up some number of them. They instantly died because my guys are bounty hunters against the galley vets, but he had death frenzy on the giant rats in that first game. So they all fought again. And when you have 6 or more giant rats, they're -2 rend. So like my guys went from I had all at defense. They were on a 5+, I think, with the save. It's like he killed 8 of them or something. I think we agreed on 8 because there was like a little bit confusion because on the death frenzy, like the rend tears down and we didn't do that. He just rolled everything at a straight -2 rend because I think because you have to pull them like one. It's a weird interaction. In fact, I don't even know how it works because so Daughters of Cain have this rule that when the model dies, it fights on death or whatever, right? So or it does a mortal wound on dying or something.
Are you talking the snakes?
Yeah, so the snakes. So yeah, so the snakes fight on death, and then after they fight, they do the 4+, they do the mortal wound on a 2+ or whatever.
The crystal, that's the crystal touch. Yeah.
So when you combine those 2 rules, so like they die, so you pull one model, they die. Some people play it as that model becomes its own unit, and then they roll the crystal touch after fighting. I don't believe it works that way.
No, I don't think it works that way.
Some people do play it that way. So that comes to the question with the giant rats. If you're going to play it that way, do they just not have rend on death frenzy, which doesn't make any sense to me because it doesn't separate out units. But this is a constant conversation. There's a lot of people with the Blood Sisters because the one Blood Sisters faction, the
Xantha Kai.
Yeah, they fight on death, and then the people are like, well, then this one model crystalline touches, like that doesn't make any sense to me, but sure. You know?
No, I think that's wrong. I think I know we've been streaming for like 2.5 hours almost, but like I'm pretty sure that's wrong.
Yeah. But again, I've heard it in multiple different GTs, and I'm just like, you know what, I don't want to fight about it. But it's wild, like how these same rules get played differently.
Which goes back to why you want to have that initial conversation. And if you don't agree, because the last thing you want to do is then the way that you play a certain rule,
right,
actually maybe very different to the decisions. You may not have done X to do Y because you were setting up Z. So again, it's important.
Yeah, and especially if you have a question about that rule, make sure you talk with your TO about they don't allow it on death. So again, it's like a question. Like it's a wild question that a lot of people believe it works.
I'm 90% sure it doesn't happen on death. But anyway, so we're talking now Skaven. So the giant rats, they do a lot of rend, they do some good damage, especially bounty hunters. The other combination here as well is the Master Molder on a 3-up can bring back the unit once per game. So it means you can throw them into your opponent, do serious damage for 180 points. They die, you come back, you've now got a whole bunch of bodies again.
Yeah, also the Master Molder just does it at the beginning of the movement phase. He can whip them into a frenzy, and they only
+3
yeah,
to
they get
their
+3 to their charge. They come out of the gnaw holes outside of 9, and then they only need a 6 to make a charge.
Yeah,
and that's what he did. And like that was they were very, very impressive. That was the only thing that really mattered, because again, I took my turn, I killed all his stuff, I double turned him, killed everything. There was some like nightmare fuel scenarios for him. Like I killed his screen, and I charged into his Vermin Lord Deceiver, and he piled away from my knights into the Celestant Prime, and he hit me like all of the attacks, wounded me with all the attacks, like 7 wounds went through, with the -3 rend I think the Deceiver has, and he roared me with Thankful. So I was on 6s, and I passed 4 of the 7 with the Celestant Prime.
I hate you.
Yeah.
Can I tell you why I hate you? Because my last game against Skaven with my Prime, he died full health,
Yep.
Prime. He died to a 65-point weapons team. I like 7 attacks. I whiffed 7 4-up saves or 3-up saves,
right,
which turned into double damage because of some ability. So it was 14 ward saves. I think I failed all of them but 1. So Prime just died like that. I'm like 65, 70-point idiot buddy weapons team.
Yeah, I mean, and we can talk about how that would have changed the game. I mean, the Prime did go on to kill Thankful, but Thankful already had like 9 wounds on him because I'd been peppering him with wounds that whole double turn. And the Knights killed the Deceiver very easily. So like even if the Prime did die there, the Deceiver's still dead. Thankful's still sitting on Baltic and crap. And it's just oh no, the Warp Lightning Cannons targeted my in the first game. The Warp Lightning Cannons targeted my Scarvet, and he overcharged them, got a 1 for power, and did 12 mortal wounds immediately to the Scarvet. I did prevent 4 of those with mystical terrain, and then the next Warp Lightning Cannon killed the crap out of him. So that chat question, the Warp Lightning Cannons just absolutely eviscerated the Scarvet in game 1, and it was very, very sad for me. So I lost like 8 knights and the Scarvet on turn 1 in game 1. But again, the Scarvet's not really part of my game plan. It's just not something I care about. In our second game, I was a little bit more prepared for the giant rat nonsense, and I did put the Scarvet a little bit back to make it more difficult for him to shoot. He ended up shooting and killing my so he set up this game with 2 gnaw holes in his deployment zone and then 1 gnaw hole to the side so that he could bring out 2 cannons and then they shoot into my line. This was the tiny box deployment, so it's like the 11 by 30 deployment zone. So I've not really a lot of places for me to hide. So he came out with 2 Warp Lightning Cannons. He killed my Star Seer, I think, the 3d6 charge guy.
So in neither turn he was targeting the Slan, because I think Romulo is mentioning here. I think that would be my target number 1. I don't know what Matthias was thinking, and it's not up for us to say if it was right or wrong. But
well, even overcharge. If you overcharge every single Warp Lightning Cannon, all of them are in range. It's like an average of 6 mortal wounds each. That might not kill the Slan. I mean, that's at odds even to just do enough damage because you need to get through 17 wounds, right? With the 10 wounds on the bodyguard and the Slan himself.
Yeah, but between the 3 Warp Lightning Cannons, especially if you have, because we talked, Matthias and I were talking, you get 2 solid rounds of Warp Lightning Cannon. If you get any more than 2 turns, you live in the dream.
Yeah.
And I know that's 450 points going into a 300-point model, but given how important the Slan is to your army and to Seraphon and stopping me doing things and enabling you to do things.
Well, the big thing is you can't get them overcharged and in range. So if I just put my Tower of Power out of 24, 27 inches, he can't even shoot me. And then he has to send them through the gnaw hole. If you send them through the gnaw hole, they're not going to have the engine seer to more and more warp power them. At which point they just don't have the firepower at all to kill the Slann. I mean, you're looking for, if you roll 1 power on all 3 of them, your odds even to not kill them. So it's just tough because you're going to be out of range, Romulan. That's the big thing, is like if your opponent's putting the Slann in 27 inches, that's really their mistake, I guess. There's not a deployment zone that requires you to do that, so I wouldn't, I guess.
So the lesson here is, just to call it out really quickly, the lesson here is when you're deploying the Slann in your temple, really making sure you're outside of range, because you're going to get minuses to hit and all the garrisoning rules that would normally impact, let's say, other armies.
Normal shooting, but not warp lightnings.
Correct, because it's pure mortal wounds. They can just shoot at you and have no real concern.
No negatives, no nothing. Exactly right.
Correct.
But as long as you're just not deploying your Slann on the front line, it's very difficult to get more than 1 warp lightning cannon. That if you don't go through the because each gnaw hole can only have 1 thing enter it.
Correct.
So like you can't even send in like the guy with them, so it's very difficult to get them to attack the Slann. So he didn't. He just he picked off my support heroes, the things he could guarantee. Because again, 17 wounds is, especially with, you don't get the mystical save with your bodyguard because of the way the rules work now. So, you roll your 2+, they either go on the Slann or they go on the bodyguard. But once the bodyguard are dead, then you get your mystical saves for whatever that matters.
The key to call out here as well is what you've done with the garrison, with the...
Can you hear me still? Your audio cut out. Is it just me?
Yep,
there you are.
It might be just you.
Yep, there it was. Okay, you're good now.
Yep, we good?
Yep.
Whew, whew. What I was saying is, the lesson here is that you pulled apart the castle, right? Because the Warlock Engineer is going to be boosting up those warp lightning cannons, but for him to get in range, he needs to break that up and use the gnaw hole. So you've used that to your advantage to break up a castle and force a tough decision. If I keep them in castle, then they're going to miss at least 1, maybe 2 turns of shooting. If I break it up, but you're not going to get all your synergies and your buffs. So good lesson there, folks.
Yeah, and the big thing in game 2 is he didn't send the giant rats at me. So that was my favorite day ever. I didn't have to deal with giant rats again. Instead, I got warp lightning cannon a bunch, which was, it killed like the Starseer, like I said. And then he just kind of moved everything forward. And I decided to take Desecrate Their Land on the only piece of terrain that was in his little box. He had just moved everything just far enough that I could drop 1 unit of Chameleon Skinks perfectly within 3 inches of this piece of terrain to take it. Which I was like, great, perfect. This is like perfect for me. And then when I was moving all my guys forward, I moved one of my units with it like 8.9 inches away from like the back thing. And as soon as I dropped it, he measured the thing and I was like, oh man, this is my nightmare. And he rolled like a 4 or something and they covered my objective. I lost my battle tactic. I couldn't take, it was a single, there's only one, it was the exploding realm stone. So there's only one objective.
Realmstone Cache, yep.
So he only had that one objective. There only that one objective. I didn't take my battle tactic. I couldn't take the objective. I got 0 points. I knew I was getting 0 points once he dropped back because he had expert conquerors or whatever. So it's like a ton of models on this objective. I was never going to take it. So I said, screw it. I'm playing for the double turn. I pushed everything up in the double turn. I got the double turn and just tabled him pretty much. There was nothing. He had Thankful on full wounds and a couple warp lightning cannons at like half wounds or something. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say, obviously I didn't play perfectly. I made a huge dumb blunder on giving him the ability to redeploy and deny me a battle tactic.
I mean, the dice do what dice do. What happens if you didn't win priority there? So, because I'm always an advocate of not blaming the priority roll. I think too many people blame their losses on the priority roll, and they they claim that they won because they won the priority.
Sure.
What happens if you didn't win? Is it a tighter game? Do you think that
it's absolutely a much tighter game?
Beats you? What happens?
So on that first turn, I charged with my Carnosaur into like his screen just outside of 3 inches from the Vermin Lord with the ability to pile back into the Vermin Lord after killing his screen with the Knights. So I hit the Vermin Lord for free, put some number of wounds on it, like 6. I bit him. I got 4 bites through to the wound phase with -1 rend. He passed all of those on a 4+. I was miserable about it. And then he skitter scurried away. So he just ran from combat.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, your heroes can, if they're in combat, they can choose instead of fighting to run away. So if you're trying to, like for example, the Master Molder, who, if you want to kill that hero, you need to target it early. Otherwise,
Correct.
you may lose that chance.
Exactly right. So he just ran away with him. So we had 6 wounds on that guy. Obviously, heroic recovery on him. Full health, thankful, and 2 warp lightning cannons. No, he had all 3. I didn't kill the warp lightning cannon until my double turn. So he would have had a pretty good damage output. He could have brought the last warp lightning cannon and the engine seer through the portal, more warp power, all of them, and that would have been able to target my whole army really at that point. So it would have been tough. I mean, his battle line Galatian vets, they don't matter. They die to a stiff breeze. Any of my guys will kill them, no problem. The 6 health Vermin Lord, it depends. If he gets Flaming Weapon off, he's a little bit dangerous. If he doesn't get Flaming Weapon off, he does 1 damage, and I just stop caring as quickly as it happens, especially once he's got wounds on him. Like, whatever, let him do whatever he wants to do. It really just becomes, is Thankful enough damaging, and do the Warp Lightning Cannons go off on me, Because Thankful even with 2 and 20 dice on 4+s with his braziers can do a significant amount of damage to some knights. And so it would have been a much closer game. I don't know if he wins it. I think it's a pretty bad matchup for him because, again, like outside of Thankful, there's not a lot of damage in this list once you start taking the cannons down and the clan rats and the giant rats and everything else. Like they don't really fight into my army super well. So I don't know. It would have been tough. It would have been it's hard to say. I think he would have obviously the game would have been much better for him, but I don't know. I honestly, after I made that boneheaded play and I just was like, all right, double turn here, or we can just go to the next game because I had a loss to give and I just didn't care too much about it. So
it's probably worth saying as well. Yeah. So it's a double elimination. It's a double elimination. So you did see that actually played on the other bracket where the winner, who was Nick Scooter Walters, had won all these games, but in the grand final had lost his first game to Phil, and which meant there was a replay, which he ended up dropping again. So it was a double elimination. So you could, in theory, have lost that first game to Matthias in the final, and you would have played again, but that wasn't something to worry about. Just really quickly before I ask you a couple of final questions and wrap this up, what's the lesson here? If I'm against Skaven as a Seraphon player, based on your couple of games, is there anything that you want to share that I should consider? Because Skaven is becoming more popular and it is actually doing quite well competitively.
Yeah, so I would say very simply, just it's right now, all of the lists that are currently being played are all Alpha Strike lists. Just straight up, they're going to try to get to you and kill whatever they can as quick as they can kill it. And a lot of their stuff, like Laucon lets Thankful do literally whatever he wants. The Vermin Lord Deceiver with the 6-inch Deep Strike Dreaded Skitter Leap. The giant rats with 6-inch charges coming through the gnaw hole, and the warp lightning cannons being able to shoot as far as they shoot. And I think it's 30 inches with the engine seer, who can double the movement with his artifact. I think he had, or it's a general trait. I don't know. Something let him double the movement of the warp lightning cannons. So it's very much an alpha strike list. You just have to minimize your exposure as much as you can. Just try not to get the COVID from the rats, and get your targets after that, which it's not really, especially if you under drop them, you can set up and screen in a way to minimize your exposure. You're going to get hit by the rats. If you don't have good counter magic, you're probably going to get Thankful or even Skitter Leaped. Thankful's on a +4. I mean, it's very unlikely that you're not going to get the boat down your throat. I got extraordinarily lucky not to get Thankful both of my games. I don't know how much that changes anything, because if Thankful's in my face on turn 1, Thankful's going to die on turn 1. So it's just how much damage he does before dying. He's not super durable or anything like that. He's not super fighty. He does have the the Overwatch that he can do, and he also does get to double command abilities, kind of like a Cabbage does. So that actually comes up, like if you charge into him and a cannon or something, he can overwatch you with the warp lightning cannon and himself. So there's a lot of like really cool tricks that they can do with Thankful. It's a very cool model, very, very powerful model, honestly, very powerful model. So I'd say just avoid your exposure.
Most people.
Okay, yeah. Just like a little bit of a delay on you now for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some delays kicked in.
So yeah, that's the big thing, is just try to minimize your exposure. You're very likely to be dropping before them. They want that. They want to go first. They're very much looking to hit you as fast as they can, do as much damage as they can, and hope that they take enough pieces off your board so that you can't retaliate. If you're playing a list similar to mine, that's not really going to be the case for them, because you've got all of your stuff hits and clears everything that it touches. Nothing's going to survive a 10 block of knights. Unbuffed, buff, doesn't matter. None of his units do it. And you've got just enough shooting and the Celestin Prime or some other model that you can pick your fights much better than he can. It's just a matter of surviving that first turn, which I was very fortunate to be able to do.
Yeah. And I think that Thankful as well, that usually you see it's got 4 shooting attacks. There's multiple versions of the Thankful model. So
yeah.
The last question I've got for you, Dean, and we'll wrap this up. It's been a great discussion, and I think we've all learnt a lot, especially in a non-traditional Seraphon build. It's very likely there is a new battle tome coming. I think we could almost, like, if I was a betting man, I would say yes, there's a new tome coming. What units, rules, changes are you hoping to see in the new battle tome? For me, for example, I would love to see more synergy and more reason to bring Kroxigor. I feel like you and I, being fantasy battles people, used to see a lot of synergy between Skinks and Kroxigors.
Yep.
There is no role for Kroxigors right now, and I'd love to see them in the game. What do you want to see?
I mean, the big thing is when they made this second codex is they kind of treated it like I treat it like a chaos dex at this point, where you've got 2 different factions. You've got your Starborn and you've got your Coalesced, and they I think they really dropped the ball on that, where they didn't incentivize enough into one build or another, or because they were just like, all right, well, there's this dichotomy, just take whatever units make the most sense. But as tournament players or competitive players, we're going to take the thing that's the most efficient in either of those lists. So either, if you're going to have this dichotomy, you need to force it a little bit more. And I don't like the kind of like, well, these guys get bravery 10 and these guys can't have their bravery modified. I mean, that decision alone changes what units you can take. Like, you can't take salamanders and coalesced as a result of this one single rule, because salamanders have bravery 5 or something. You kill the 3 skinks that they're hanging out with and that thing runs away every time, whereas in Starborn it doesn't. So like they did this weird chaos thing where they incentivized different models to be in different factions, but I don't think they did it in a very good way. It left Kroxigors out in the middle of nowhere, because the Coalesce faction is all about beasts and Saurus and not about skinks. And there's no real reason to take Kroxigors. You certainly can't take them in the Starborn side, because they don't get the extra draw attacks. They're not getting scaly skin. There's no incentive to take them whatsoever. So they're like one of the units I'm talking about that got caught in the middle. What I'd really hate for them to do is to just destroy all the support heroes, because like that's really what this like a lot of synergy within the different support heroes. It's an old model range. Like they turned the different heroes and they gave them just not names, like Krokgar became the Saurus Sunblood or whatever. I'd like to see them move some of the abilities off of skinks and onto Saurus. Like, there's no reason that the 3d6 charge is on a skink on a hover round. Like, this little wimpy dude is the reason I get a 3d6 charge. I can't explain that to anybody. It doesn't make any sense, other than skinks get a stick that does a magical thing, whether it's poison or it's a 3+ to run charge or whatever. So it's just strange that that's not on a Saurus. And I'd really like to see the Saurus actually do something. Have Rend. Like, having Rend. Like, the Celestite weapons, that's like Celestite's like it goes through everything like a hot knife through butter, and it's got no rend. Like, all right, well, it doesn't go through anything. It doesn't go through like butter at all, much less like a hot knife. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see like some of the lore line up to like what the things are. Like, I mean, Saurus warriors are bad because they don't have range. They're slow. Their armor save is good. Don't get me wrong. Like a 4+ save is Age of Sigmar good. It's not 40k good, but it's Age of Sigmar good. And there is like the Saurus Old Blood on foot as a 3+ save. So, like there is the possibility of these guys getting a better save. But they're so generic. There's not a lot of thought put into them. I'd like to see the Source heroes do something. I'd like to see the Pterodons and the Ripperdactyl chiefs actually have some versatility rather than being like, we increase the percentage points of Ripperdactyls by like a little bit. They'd bite a little bit harder or whatever. Just make them battle line, just something. I'd like to see a lot of the synergy changes that they've been doing in all their other books, that some things become battle line as a result. And if they're going to do this dichotomy again with a summoning build and a hardened coalesce build, which I do like it, they need to be much more focused on what models are good in which spots. And I don't, but it's tough because they're not really like that. There's like your spawning pools spawn skinks and Saurus. They should be one army. But how do you make that work inside of this? They're not space dust imagined dreamed up lizards anymore, which they pigeonholed themselves into at the beginning of Age of Sigmar or whatever.
The lore masters are probably going to shoot me down on this one, but I wonder if the answer is within Skaven. Because if you look at how Skaven works with Pestilence and Molder, and it's one army, but
Yes.
the more heroes and the more units you have in one, the stronger the abilities go. So I wonder if, again, that spawning pool is actually something Skaven-y.
No, that'd be really cool. Just, Saurus get these abilities. Like this Saurus is just to get -1 damage. Croxagores get -1 damage. You don't need to give it to every monster in the world, but give it to the Saurus, give it to the Croxagores. That's just something they get. They have that thing. Skinks, whatever, do whatever skink things, yeah, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to just needs to be a little more modernized. A lot of the overlapping buffs that made the book a complete terror in second edition, and I did play just a bit in second edition, and the book was a terror. It was just a complete mess of, if I roll a 6, you take 2 mortal wounds. It becomes exploding 6. Your mother disowns you, and you lost your birthday. And I was like, oh, okay, well that's bad.
I'll never forget being at a Masters tournament commentating, and I remember seeing a Carnosaur do 72 damage back in first edition or second edition, where you could stack CP. It was just like 72 damage. And I'll never forget as well, the Engine of the Gods used to, I think on an 18, used to allow you to have an extra turn.
Yeah.
So somebody was at the bottom of the turn, generated an extra turn, and then one priority roll. So they got 3 turns in a row. I'll never forget those 2 busted rules. But
right,
I think what you've said is, you want to see more lore tied into the book, and I would love to see that. The last question then, and just because you're on a roll, is if you got to add a unit to the book that doesn't exist already, what would you add?
I don't even know. Because I think that I'd rather not, honestly. I'd rather just what they have. I'd rather see the things that already have sculpts getting maybe new updated sculpts, and I'd rather them focus their efforts on updating cold ones to not look like the way they do, and just getting the rules right for these things rather than trying to add something new and sell me the new hotness. I don't want to buy a new model because it's the new great whatever. It's the new Primaris Marine or Thunderstrike Armor Stormcast or whatever. It's not a Liberator. It's a Vindictor, and it's got a spear that's just better. It's like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. You got me.
You're no fun, Dean. I'll play along with my own game then.
Sure.
I want Carnosaurs without a mount. Give me feral dinosaurs without no mounts, and
Total War style.
I would love that army. I would love a Thunder. Yeah. All right. That's what I was hoping for. But yes, I think we all agree that Seraphon deserves updated sculpts and new sculpts. And I love the Warcry expansion. Give me more salamanders and the Razordons. Give me updated Saurus warriors. Give me updated heroes. Give me the range is craving an update.
Yeah, it's just a lot of old stuff. You look at the Drake Spawn Knights from the Dark Elves or whatever, and they're just like these sleek, elegant, cold ones. They look great, and then you're just like, well, I got this boxy guy that looks like it was made in Minecraft, and here we go. I'm gonna send 25 of these at you.
He's it's so derpy.
Yeah,
it's so derpy. Dean, if people want to chat to you, are you on the Facebook Seraphon group? Are you on Twitter? Like, where can people talk to you if they want to like show off their amazingness that is Seraphon? Or you're on the East Coast of America, so they might see you around.
Yeah, I am going to LVO. I just bought a ticket for that just like yesterday, I think, actually, because I finally worked out a housing situation because the housing or the hotels are so expensive for the 3 or 4 nights you've got to be there. So I'm going to that. But otherwise, I am on Twitter. It's Iceman, ICEMYN. You can find me on Twitter if you're looking for me there. I only see your notification if you DM me or tag me because I'm not really on Twitter. And as long as Twitter is continuing to exist into the future, which is in the air at this point, or just find me on Facebook, whatever you want to do. And yeah, happy to answer any questions. Anybody wants to reach out.
Well, I hope to see you at LVO. I can't wait. I'll be bringing those Gargants, so hopefully we can test that theory of who's stronger right now. And hopefully it's on my side.
Or we can just, set up a game and I'll happily play after hours. Like there's nothing else going on, we can throw down.
Amazing. Dean, you're incredible. Thank you for your time. Congratulations again on being champion of the world. And you've now got a priority target on your head. Let's see what happens in the new General's Handbook and how it impacts Seraphon. Let's see what happens in the new Battle Tome. I think it's some great insights and discussions and hopefully some new ideas on testing some units that maybe haven't really seen the field of day. And yes, just to reconfirm, Dean ran the War Spear, not the Blade on the Carnosaur.
Yes. I'm not an actual crazy person. Yeah.
All right, Dean. Thanks everyone who joined the stream. Thank you to my guest. Thank you for everyone who watches it on the replay. You know what the deal is. Put in the comment section what you like and how you're building your Seraphon, and if there's any ideas that maybe we didn't discuss. And you know the deal, Patreon and all that good stuff. Dean, we're out. Thanks everybody. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AOS Coast Patreons and YouTube members who are going in, and the funds are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.